up, everybody? Good morning. I'm not Bob Cooney, but I have the initials BC. Bill Colarulo in the house today, covering for Bob for the next 4 hours, and I'm joined by the one and only Amy Fadul. What's up, Amy?
So glad to be here. Good stuff. Good day.
I'm excited to get to work together. And I'm also excited because later today at 1 o'clock, we will hear from the Eagles' offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator for the first time since Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio were hired. So we're going to spend some time this morning talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll get into what we're hoping to learn from both coordinators later today. But before we do that, I also want to talk about Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, because after free agency, after the draft, the "in Howie we trust" mantra is back. But do we trust Nick Sirianni? Do we trust Jalen Hurts? So we're going to spend a lot of time talking Eagles. And obviously we have to get into the Phillies as well. They lost yesterday. That's breaking news right now.
It is.
That the Phillies lost yesterday, but they still have the best record in baseball. So we're going to talk about the Fightin' Phils, their confidence level, their expectations. And I'm going to ask all of you if your expectations have changed a little bit with this hot start. And if we have time, we'll get into some Sixers as well. We're going to be joined by Matt Breen of the Philadelphia Inquirer at 12 o'clock. So an action-packed show today. Well, let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I just asked that question. In Howie we trust, but do we trust Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts? Amy, do you trust Nick?
Yeah, it's interesting because he's obviously going to be on a pretty short leash this year. I think that goes without saying. Does that make him more trustworthy? Does that make him more nervous? But what am I trusting him to do? What is it you say you do here right now? Is he just more of a manager? Do I trust him more because of that? Probably. He's not calling the plays. He's not running the offense like he has in the past. So that probably gives my trust more. But it also, I don't have to trust him as much. He doesn't do as much as far as having his fingerprints all over that offense like we've seen in the past. So, yeah, I mean, I trust him to be able to be the leader of men, to be able to bring the team together. I think that's what he's very good at. I do have trust in him on that. It'll be interesting to see if things go sideways. That's where the real trust comes in. If there's some adversity early on, how he kind of rights the ship.
Yeah, it's a great point about the adversity, because you look back to Nick Sirianni's first year as head coach, there were no expectations. So although they didn't come out to the hottest start, they did bounce back down the stretch, but there were no expectations. And then you go to his second year, 2022, really no adversity. They had a great season. The only adversity was Jalen Hurts got hurt for a couple of games at the end of the year, and then they go all the way to the Super Bowl. But last year, 10-1 start, then the adversity hits, getting blown out by San Francisco, and they were just never able to bounce back. So can they handle any adversity? And a lot of people are saying, well, it's important for the Eagles to come out to a hot start. Well, not the easiest week one matchup.
Right.
Friday night, Green Bay Packers in Brazil. You basically lost a home game there. Schedule release is coming out next Wednesday. Let's hope it's a fairly easy schedule to start the year.
I mean, you know the opponents, you know where they are. It'll be interesting to see how they stack it up. Everybody's coming through on a blank slate. You don't know what some of these teams are. You know what they are on paper, right? You know that certain players are going to be more, or certain teams are going to be more talented based on the players, but you never know if they're going to live up to those expectations. So I think a hot start, a good start is what you're looking for, even if they don't win 10 in a row or 8 in a row in the beginning like we've seen in years past. At least there's some kind of semblance of like, all right, they're coming together. I think that's what people can get behind. You just don't want to see a team come out flat out of the gates, look disorganized and, kind of lost out there. That is the biggest concern, I think, for me. But there is a lot of carryover from last year's team. It would really surprise me if they came out and were sluggish and not together and had not had some kind of cohesive kind of situation when they're trotting out there on the field and you're looking like, how is this team functioning like that? How's the quarterback not on the same page as the wide receivers? How is the defense not talking? That would surprise me given the fact that they have the new coordinator and what he's supposed to bring in both coordinators, Vic Fangio and in Kellen Moore, obviously. That would surprise me. So I think when you go back to trust Nick Sirianni, you need to trust him just to keep the ship afloat and keep it, the rudder going the way that you want it to. His trust level is commensurate with what you've asked him to do, and I think it's not as much, and I think that helps.
So I've been a big defender of Nick Sirianni. here on the station, a lot of people wanted to see the Eagles move on with the way the season ended last year. And my main argument for the reason why I felt Nick Sirianni deserved to come back was because I felt that we were asking him to do something this past season that has literally never been done in the NFL before. You look at teams that have gone to a Super Bowl, lost both their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator after going to the Super Bowl. They've never got past the divisional round. In fact, it's only happened on 2 other occasions. You got to look at the 1995 San Francisco 49ers. Mm-hmm. They had George Seifert and Hall of Fame back Steve Young. They couldn't overcome that type of change from one year to the next. Then you look at the 2005 New England Patriots, who had the GOAT, Tom Brady, who just had a pretty good roast, by the way, and Bill Belichick. They couldn't get past the divisional round. And I know people think I'm making excuses for Sirianni, but when you look at that type of history and you look at the Super Bowl hangover in of itself that only 6 coaches have ever been able to overcome, I thought it was a little unfair to say Nick Sirianni, although he's had so much success in 3 years, the fact that he couldn't overcome something that no one else has ever been able to overcome, fire him.
Yeah, I think it was the way that they ended the season. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And no, I don't think that in reality Nick Sirianni was really in danger of losing his job if he had come out and said, like, yeah, I'm not changing a single thing. I'm going to keep all these guys and whatever else. As soon as he realized that there needed to be a change, I think he was amenable to it for a myriad of reasons, and one of which keeping his job. But 2, you can't have that into a season. So while the examples are really good because you're looking at guys in teams that are incredible, when you talk about the 95 Niners and then the 05 Patriots, these are Hall of Fame teams constructed in a way that they should have gone back. The Eagles were also constructed in a way that should have gone back, but maybe it was a little bit of fool's gold that start, right? So when they have the collapse, I think it was the way that the season ended, and then they lose the first, and they were never in that game. That Bucs game, they were never in it. No one walked into that game thinking, yeah, they feel good about that Eagles team. And so I think that's when people thought there was a change coming. They felt it from, week 14 on.
Yeah, and you're spot on when you said it's a little bit of fool's gold, because one of my arguments has been to the people who said, well, look at the way the season ended. Nick Sirianni, you can't bring him back. It was an epic collapse. Well, was the collapse really that epic? If you look at the first 11 games of that season, they really should not have been 10-1. We were saying it all along, like, how are they doing this? How are they figuring out ways to win? Where they could have very easily lost a few of those games, and if they did, well, now we're talking about a team that was maybe 8-4, 8-3, 7-4 going down the stretch, and now the collapse isn't as epic. And I've said before, I think that the Eagles team was trying to tell us who they were for those 11 games, and we just didn't want to listen. And then it was, oh, what an epic collapse. They really weren't that good last year.
Yeah, I mean, it is an epic collapse. It's actually hard to even think about like a team that was flying high on paper. But you're looking at a team, they absolutely probably were trying to tell people that. They also probably should have been, like, the coaches should have been paying attention and realizing, like, oh, we can't keep doing the same thing because it's going to come back to us. And it did. And so you saw that. But it really amplified the disappointment when you have that start, whether you saw it on – because the game that really precipitated it is that Bills game. And you're thinking, here is a team that is expected to go to the Super Bowl, and the Bills. You play this unbelievable game. Jalen Hurts wins the game for you. I was at that game. It was amazing. And you're thinking, they are that team. They can win these games. They can be this 10-1 team. And then they were like, no, just kidding. We are definitely not that team. We pulled the wool over your eyes.
Yeah, it was tough to watch. It was tough to watch, but we're trying to turn the page. We're trying to look forward to the 2024 season, and that's why we're asking the question today, do you have trust in Nick Sirianni? We'll get to Jalen Hurts shortly, but let's keep it with the Nick Sirianni conversation. And if you want to get in, 610-632-0975. You can call or you can text that number. Do you trust Nick Sirianni going into 2024? Now, I do trust Nick Sirianni. And I'm going to give you some stats, Amy, that should make us all trust Nick Sirianni. So when you think of these two names, Tony Dungy and Don Shula, what do you think of as far as head coaches in the NFL during NFL history?
Super Bowl winning coaches.
And maybe two of the greatest coaches we've ever seen. Not the greatest, but two of the greatest. Don Shula, the only undefeated team
Right.
ever. Tony Dungy, a ton of success in Indianapolis. Well, Tony Dungy, Don Shula, and Nick Sirianni are the only 3 coaches in NFL history to start back-to-back seasons 10-1 or better. They're the only 3.
I got you.
I think I have to convince Amy
Yeah,
today.
I'm with you. My thing is, like, Nick Sirianni, only Eagles coach ever to have 3 straight playoffs to start his tenure here.
Yes.
Wonderful. There is no doubt. I have trust in him, but it's a looser trust because he's just not tasked with doing stuff as much as he was. So I guess my issue is, what am I trusting him to do? Am I trusting him just to keep the team together, which I think is a very important thing? And I am not the type of person that's like, oh, you don't call any play. I think that Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh, who don't, well, I guess Jim might call a little bit. John Harbaugh doesn't call anything, doesn't do anything, on paper. But it doesn't mean that he's not still involved in the team. Mike Tomlin, these are 2 guys that have also won the Super Bowl, and they're not listed as play callers. They don't call the defense. They don't call the offense. They don't do anything on paper. But you can do other stuff. I'm interested to see what he does in this new role. So my trust is a tentative one because he's not been in this role before. He's an offensive guy. He's called plays. Even when he hasn't officially called them, he's still pulling the strings on them. Can he take a step back? Can he be that guy to let Kellen Moore do his thing? I'll be interested to see that.
Yeah, and when you talk about Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, those CEO-type coaches, the one, Dan Campbell in Detroit, really a CEO-type coach.
Tremendous job.
Tremendous job, but I will say some very questionable decisions in the NFC playoffs.
That's actually really hard to watch, some of that stuff. You wonder if he could just come in and be like, hey, yeah, you need to go ahead and why are you not punting? What's going on? Kick the field goal. But, yeah, but maybe that lends it to the point because Dan Campbell, unusual spot for him to be managing the game when he hadn't been managing the game. It'll be interesting to see for me if Nick Sirianni can be that guy that takes a step back and does become the kind of overview type of coach where he has to have his fingerprints on everything and not just one thing. You have to manage everything and not just focus on the offense because you want to see how the play calls. And that doesn't mean that he's not going to have input. Of course he is. Of course he's going to go, and it's going to be, they've already said how it's going to be collaborative, as it should be. He's an offensive coach. But I'm interested if push comes to shove, you hired Kellen Moore for this role. He was specifically picked, best coordinator out there. Let's go get him. And then you can't meddle with that.
So you bring that up, and that's interesting because I want to play a clip, Ray, of Nick Sirianni after they hired Kellen Moore talking about what this offense may look like. Here's Nick Sirianni.
He's been highly successful, and we've been highly successful, and I think that I'm really looking forward to meshing the things, meshing what he's done really well together with the things that we've done really well. Again, I think it's going to be a really good match, and Kellen's track record speaks for itself.
So that's Nick Sirianni saying it's going to be a meshing of offenses. And I know when he said that, a lot of fans lost their minds. Stay away from it. There's a lot of fans who don't want Sirianni involved at all. I think Sirianni should be involved.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a hands-off approach. I think that Kellen Moore comes to him, here's what I've got, here's the pieces. Kellen Moore has to be excited. I'm anxious to hear from him because it's the first time we're going to hear from him where he's talking about they've locked up their 1 and 1A receivers for the foreseeable future. That has to get a guy like him salivating. Like, here's all the stuff you can run. You have Dallas Goedert back there. You have Jalen Hurts that's looking for something to prove. This is a really good year, I think, to be the coordinator offensively for the Eagles, given everything that's kind of fallen into place. So to shut out the head coach, I think, would be unfair. Even if you're not an offensive head coach, if you're a defensive one, you're still going to have input. But I think Nick Sirianni is going to need to have his voice heard in that room, and I think Kellen Moore is going to have to respect it, and I think he will.
Yeah, I think that to say, hey, we don't want Sirianni involved at all, and in fact, I did the crossover with Andrew and John right before we came on, and Andrew Salciunas said as such, too. I don't want Sirianni involved in the offense. But I think it would be criminal for Sirianni not to say to Kellen Moore, hey, these are the things that we did really well as an offense over the last couple of seasons. These are the things that really worked with Jalen Hurts, because I know everybody wants to give the credit to Shane Steichen in 2022, and he was a great offensive coordinator. We saw what he did last year in Indianapolis, but to completely ignore the contributions that Sirianni had with that offense, I think is wrong. So you don't want to give him any credit for 2022, but yet we want to give him all the blame for 2023. And as bad as things looked down the stretch last year for that offense, they did still finish top 8 in the NFL, which is just mind-blowing to me. So, yes, I want this to be primarily Kellen Moore's offense. I want Kellen Moore to be the one calling the plays and designing the route concepts and all of that. But to just say to Nick Sirianni, we don't want you involved at all after they've had a lot of success while he's here, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think that's realistic either. I think that Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie have to understand when they gave him this new role of like, all right, we're going to bring in the coordinator. This is a guy that we believe in. We know that you can believe. Make him, we want to accept whatever your ideas are too. Like sell him on it. Because I thought the meshing thing, people are like, oh, why do you need to mesh anything? That's just not a realistic. You're not going to have a head coach that's going to be completely hands off on the offense, especially one that's an offensive coordinator, in a past life, and a guy that really prides himself on the offense. And you could I imagine they have a lot of collaborations. Like, here's our playbook. Here's what we worked with. Here's what A.J. Brown can do. Is Kellen Moore saw it, but he didn't see it. Do you know what I mean? Like, he saw it, but he didn't see it the way that those guys saw it. So I think there's going to be a little bit more collaboration, and I think that's actually good. It's not wrong. It's an unrealistic expectation to say, Nick Sirianni, no, we'll just see you on Sunday.
Yeah, and with Nick Sirianni, and you touched on this a little bit before about trying to keep everything together if they do run into any adversity. What surprised me the most last season is that everything I heard about Nick Sirianni, everything I observed with Nick Sirianni his first 2 years here was how good he was at building a strong culture. And the last thing I expected last season was to see some cracks in the foundation of that culture, and that's what it felt like. And we heard from Kenny Gainwell yesterday. We played that clip on the air about how there wasn't a lot of communication between upper management and the team. I don't know what he meant by it. He kind of contradicted himself.
Yeah, that was a very confusing statement.
Confusing. I'm sure they're not happy with him.
Yeah, he's all over the place.
But I always looked at Nick Sirianni as that's what he was the best at. Not necessarily offense or defense or play calling, but it was building that strong culture, and you just didn't see it last year. Did you find that surprising?
It was interesting, but losing really exposes a lot of stuff, and if there was any kind of cracks in that, and maybe there was a little bit more cruise control than what the Eagles coaches would like to admit. You had a team that's coming off a Super Bowl. You start this amazing season, 10-1, you're like, oh, look at this. We're really feeling it right now. Maybe you don't have to be as hands-on as you were the year before and the year before that. And that's where they can learn from that mistake. They need to be maybe a little bit more present in certain situations. And yeah, Gainwell, I listened to his whole bit and not just the clips or whatever, because I was like, what is this guy even saying? And then, of course, he says, like, oh, and then we're losing, and then we're all talking amongst ourselves. Don't you have to take some ownership, Kenny Gainwell? You saw the losing, too. Like, what are you doing?
And he talks about how, and you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they're connected. How do you know? I mean, they won the Super Bowl, but you're not in the locker room.
Yeah, exactly. They're connected because they're raising that trophy. So there's a lot of teams that are connected out there. So, yeah, I mean, 2020 hindsight, I get it. I get what Kenny Gainwell's trying to say. People are looking for reasons for the collapse. I think it's a myriad of things. I don't think it's just communication, but I think there probably is something to that. When you have a team that starts like that it was coming off a Super Bowl, you probably think you don't have to be as hands-on about certain things. And you've got these amazing leaders in the locker room, and Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, and look, what are we doing? So I can see why maybe, and then by the time they probably thought they needed to dive in, now the spiraling has already started.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, too, when you're talking about the collapse of it being a myriad of things, because I've said that a lot, too. I think a lot of fans wanted to hear, this is the one reason why it went that way. And I don't think there was one reason. I think there were a lot of factors involved in the season going the way it did. And for me, none more than the fact that I don't think that defense was good enough. I don't care who the defensive coordinator was last year. They were a bad defense all season. You look at their final numbers, 26th in the league in yards against, 30th in points against, 31st in passing yards against, 31st in third down, 30th in red zone. And then their run defense, which started out so great down the stretch, the last 8 games, over 130 yards a game. They just weren't good enough from a personnel perspective, not absolving Sirianni or some of the coaching decisions, but I just don't think that they were good enough. So we're going to continue this conversation because the roster has us all excited. The draft has us all excited. But do we trust Nick Sirianni? We're also going to get into whether or not we trust Jalen Hurts. And then we'll turn our focus to what we're hoping to learn from the coordinators who speak today. You could hear that right here on 97.5 The Fanatic at 1 o'clock. But we want to hear from you, 610-632-0975. Do you trust Nick Sirianni? I'm Bill Colarulo in with Amy Fadul today. We'll be right back. The whole city is back to saying, in Howie we trust, after that NFL draft and free agency period. But we're asking the question today, do we trust Nick Sirianni? Do we trust Jalen Hurts? Because Howie Roseman gave them a pretty good roster. But can we trust the coach and the quarterback? I'm Bill Colarulo in for Bob Cooney today, along with Amy Fadul. Amy, so we talked a lot about Nick Sirianni and whether or not we should trust him. And we talked about the culture, that was something that he usually, we thought, was very good with. And a lot of people now, after the way the season ended last year, are saying, well, no, the culture, there wasn't one. Things really were bad down the stretch. And I always feel like I'm defending Sirianni, but you kind of brought up before the break players like Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox, who I don't think anyone in this town would argue, tremendous leaders. Mm-hmm. But even they couldn't stop the quote-unquote collapse down the stretch.
Yeah, the slide. It's like you could see it happening. And the only issue I have with saying Nick Sirianni can't control the locker room or let the culture slide is you negated everything in the first 2 years. Like it was created. He carried it through. They had the good start. Maybe they didn't recognize the slide for what it was, whether it was the fool's gold coupled with losing compounding itself, and then you got the doubt. Now the cracks start exposing themselves. Maybe they didn't recognize that soon enough to try to remedy it. But that doesn't mean that he can't create that, and he hasn't created that, and he can't garner that again. I think that's a little bit a little too recency bias on that one. You can't just rule out everything he's done just because of how. And listen, we all know it's an epic collapse. It's never been done before. You start 10-1 and then you finish the way they did. We all saw it. We were there. We saw it, everyone. But I feel like it's a little disingenuous to me.
Yeah, and I know this is going to probably get some fans riled up, but I look at the NFC East, and as bad as things went for Sirianni last year towards the end, I still think the Eagles have the best coach in the NFC East. I look at Mike McCarthy. Well, we know that no coach in NFL history has ever won Super Bowls for multiple franchises. I highly doubt Mike McCarthy's going to be the first one.
It was the best and most hilarious day when Jerry Jones said, yeah, he's coming back. Eagles fans should have rejoiced. That's amazing. Good. Keep him here. Keep going. Keep riding that train.
Yeah, McCarthy hasn't been to a championship game in 7 years. And then you look at Washington. Well, they just hired Dan Quinn. Great defensive coordinator. But he's never had success as a head coach. 3 years in Atlanta, 14-23. And remember the 28-3 comeback the New England Patriots had against the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, speaking of defensive minds, where to go on that game? That was also brought up on the Tom Brady roast, which was a pretty funny moment a couple times. That was a decent roast. There was times where I was like, a little too much Tom Brady for me.
Yeah, there was a little too much Tom Brady, but there were some funny lines. It was just too long. It was just,
They
3
always
hours?
are, yeah, because everybody wants to get their set in. But, yeah, no, I don't think you look around the NFC East and think, wow, that's a juggernaut of a division led by the head coaches. There's some talent there, clearly. We know that. The Cowboys will always have that talent when you look at their roster. But there's no one that invokes, like, well, you have to go against X coach. Like, right, Bill Belichick's not there.
No, and I thought that Brian Daboll in New York was a good coach, and I really thought that the Giants finally got it right when they hired him. And I do think he's a good coach. The problem is they have a severe lack of talent, especially at the quarterback position. Yeah. And Daboll's 15-19-1 as a head coach. So as much as fans want to get on Nick Sirianni, I think when you look at what he's done so far in Philadelphia, you have to feel good that we have the best coach in the NFC East. Now, do you agree with me on that one?
Yeah, I think that, and the thing is, you can actually think that you have the best coach and still want him to perform. You can still be upset when things happen. I think those things can be parallel. People that are going to say, like, oh, no, but the Eagles need to fire him because they're going to be so much better without him. Well, the grass is not always greener in that case. But I think you can also want him to do better while also thinking he's a great coach. I think that can coexist. Those two thoughts can coexist. And that's probably where I am. I think he's a very good coach. He has shown that. The previous 2 seasons and the beginning of last season showed that he had the ability to be a winner, to coach a winning team, and to create that culture of winning. That doesn't get negated completely for me by the collapse. It does make me question things, but that's normal. And I don't want to be black and white on that. I don't want to be like, well, nope, he tanked the season last year and therefore I'm out on him. I don't think that that's realistic. I don't feel that way.
No, it's a great point. So we want to hear from you. Do you trust Nick Sirianni? Howie Roseman's given him a pretty good roster to work with in 2024, but do you trust the head coach? 610-632-0975. You can call or you can text. We're now going to go to the phones because Mike from Doylestown wants to do a little Eagles talk. What's up, Mike?
Hi, Amy. Hi, Bob. Hey, I take the Michael Jordan approach in that every year you can get better, right? So Nick Sirianni doesn't get a clean slate. If there are 8 criteria in which we're judging a head coach, and let's say he was above average in 4 areas and below average in 4 areas, and he comes in with an average rating, he has things to work on this year to get to an above average rating. And we need to assess him based on that. We don't just wipe the slate clean because it's a new year and give him a 0 rating. He gets maybe an average rating, and what does he need to do to build off that rating to get above average in his rating for this year? So do I trust him? I think we've surrounded him with players and with new coaches and stuff that can help him get an above average rating. But I don't believe last year he got an F, and I don't believe he got an A. But he has things to work on to get better this year, and I do trust that he will work on those. But after this year, if he can't go from average to above average and he stays average, you have to then start to assess whether he's going to be the future coach of the team or not.
Mike, great call.
Great point.
Really good points, Mike. And Mike's right in that, look, the NFL, you heard the old expression, stands for not for long.
Mm-hmm.
We are judging these coaches and these players from year to year. And Nick Sirianni, there are things he has to improve upon this year. There's no doubt about it after the way last season ended. But I think Mike would probably agree with what Amy and I are saying, which is just because of what happened at the end of last year didn't mean that the Eagles should have just thrown everything out the window and say, we're going to fire Nick Sirianni. We're going to ignore the fact that his first 45 games with Jalen Hurts, they went 34-11. Throw it out the window, Amy.
That's it. We don't want that at all. That's a terrible thing. I thought it was a really, it's an important thing because there is carryover. You have to carry some of that over. But that's also helpful to carry it over. It's helpful for Nick Sirianni and for the Eagles to carry it over, some of that feeling, because they know it's not like these guys are unaware. They were there. We all saw it. And I think that can help him. I think you need to give him a little bit of a cleaner slate, given the fact, not a clean slate, a cleaner slate, given the fact that it is new coordinators and some new personnel across the board. I think that there's a little bit more wiggle room, but it's a very short leash he has this year. I don't think that there's any question that if something goes sideways for the Birds this year, Nick Sirianni is feeling the heat. He will feel the heat all season long unless they start 10-0 again.
Yeah, and we're going to hear from the coordinators today at 1 o'clock. We'll run those press conferences live here on The Fanatic, and we'll start to talk later on in the show about what we're hoping to learn from both of those coordinators. But with Nick Sirianni probably stepping into more of a CEO-type role this year, I go back to 2022 because you had Shane Steichen as your offensive coordinator. You had Jonathan Gannon. I know he was a polarizing figure in this town, but that defense was really good, whether you liked Gannon or not. And Sirianni was kind of in that CEO role, and they had a ton of success in 2022. Really, they were a half a football away from maybe one of the best seasons, if not the best season we've ever seen in Eagles history. So I think he can step into that CEO-type role. And, Amy, one of the things that I've loved about Sirianni is if you look at some of the game day decisions, I very rarely watch an Eagles game and think, why did he make that decision? Like we did with Dan Campbell in the playoffs, where why did he go for it here? Now, I know you can second guess maybe not going for it in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. There's some people who think he shouldn't have kicked the field goal. But usually, to me, game day decisions, clock management, Sirianni gets it right.
Yeah, there's very few. You're looking at maybe 1 or 2 over the course of 3 seasons where you're thinking, oh, I wouldn't have done that, or this could have been a little bit better, or why are you kicking here? Why not go for it? Why are you punting? Things like that. But that's all. That's going to be every coach. There's not a single coach in the history of the NFL that you're going to go, yep, he made every single decision as well as I wanted him to, because there's going to be so many different people that have those opinions. But I think that overall, he's done a good job. It's just the recency of the collapse and the way that that season ended, and then to go into that playoff game so flat, it really left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. But that's why it's so great that there's so much more, like, excitement's probably too strong a word, but hope, and just general feeling of, okay, well, that was a blip. If you can look at it as a blip and think they've cleaned house from some of the guys that you thought maybe caused that, as far as coordinators, and maybe they weren't ready and maybe they weren't up to the task, and Sean Desai and Brian Johnson, maybe that's what it was. And so you give him a little bit more wiggle room in that regard. But I think the proof will be in the pudding. When you look at this season, I'm excited to see where the schedule stacks out, how it starts for them, if it sets up nicely, because I think this team could gain some strength from that and confidence. I don't think you'll see anything like what happened last year. I think that they've learned from that. I think across the board, the players, the front office, and the coaches learned from it. You have to keep a better temperature on the room. You know, if you can take Kenny Gainwell for whatever, you can figure out what he tried to say, but the bottom line, he was saying there was a lot of miscommunication. And as a coach, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that your players felt like they were not being heard, or you were misheard, I guess, is probably even a better example. That's kind of what I took away from that. And that's been when people have talked about it, even that are currently on the team. Listen, we just kind of lost our way. You need to recognize that sooner. And I think that was a really good learning process. It's going to be very interesting to see how they start.
And we're spending a lot of time so far in the first hour talking about whether or not we trust Nick Sirianni. But I want to kind of change the conversation a little bit to whether or not we trust Jalen Hurts, because I don't care how good of a coach you are in the NFL. You can't survive bad quarterback play. We saw it with one of the greatest coaches of all time, Bill Belichick. When they moved on from Tom Brady, he wasn't as successful with the likes of Mac Jones. You even saw it with Andy Reid. When Andy Reid was here in Philadelphia, as great as he was with Donovan McNabb, part of the reason why Andy Reid lost his job here was they were never able to find a true successor to Donovan McNabb. They tried it with Kevin Kolb. They tried it with Michael Vick. So I think no matter how good of a job Nick Sirianni does this season, it's all going to come down to whether or not Jalen Hurts has a good year, like it does throughout the NFL. You need solid quarterback play. So when we get back, let's change the conversation a little bit on whether or not we trust Jalen Hurts at the quarterback position. And we want to hear from you. 610-632-0975. You can call or you can text. Do you trust Jalen Hurts? I'm Bill Colarulo filling in for Bob Cooney along with Amy Fadul. We'll be right back. 10 o'clock hour is brought to you by Window Nation. Take advantage of Window Nation's 50% off sale on all style windows. Plus, make no down payment with no payments and no interest for 12 full months. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. I'm Bill Colarulo in for Bob Cooney today. He has the day off. He'll be back tomorrow, along with the one and only Amy Fadul. And we're having a conversation about the Philadelphia Eagles because both coordinators are scheduled to speak to the media today at 1 o'clock. The first time we'll hear from Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. So we're asking the question, do we trust Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts? We'll get into the coordinators in a second, but we spent a considerable amount of time talking about whether or not we trust Nick Sirianni. And what I said right before the break, Amy, was it really comes down to whether or not Jalen Hurts has a good season, because no head coach can really survive bad quarterback play, no matter who you are. So do you think Jalen Hurts has a bounce-back year in 2024?
Yeah, there's no indication to me yet why he would not. This guy works hard. People can say whatever they want about him, in his personality. I think there's a lot of people like, he doesn't open up and whatever. He is a hard worker, breed of one. We heard all of that stuff. I think that he is so self-motivated and so self-driven that he would not allow himself to have a season like he did last year in the way that it ended. It would not just surprise me, it would shock me. He is, because that's just how he is. There's been nothing in his makeup at any chance for him to fold when it's come to adversity. You go back to his high school days, you go back to his college days, different colleges, and anything that he's ever had as far as adversity and the way that he needed to be asked more from, he's always stepped up. I just think that there's very, very, very little room in my mind for that guy not to have a complete turnaround from last year.
Well, our great producer, Ray, who we haven't heard from yet today. What's up, Ray?
Morning. How are you?
Ray just put up a Twitter poll. And what's the Twitter poll, Ray?
All right, our Twitter poll at 975 middays. Who do you trust more to have a bounce-back campaign in 2024? Two options, Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. And if it's any indication how people feel about Nick Sirianni or how they feel about Jalen Hurts right now, 85% of the vote early on.
Wow, that's high for an early vote. And we still want to hear from you, so you can get in by call or by text, 610-632-0975. We're talking about trust with Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Who do you trust to have a bounce-back campaign? Now, I look at Jalen Hurts from last season, and maybe I'm in the minority here with this one, but I didn't think he had as bad of a season as some people thought that he did. I think the major difference when you look at his numbers from 2022 to 2023 were turnovers. You go to the 2022 campaign, only 8 turnovers. Last year, 20 turnovers. So you eliminate those, It's a different season.
And it's when the turnovers came. That's why it seems like it was so bad. Right? When you look at something in the macro of it, in the larger picture, 20 turnovers is obviously really terrible. I mean, that's like Dak Prescott numbers we're talking about. That is just abhorrent for your quarterback to turn the ball over. But it's when those turnovers happen. It's how they happen. It's in the scenarios of these games that they were in it and that the game was given away. And they were trying to mount these comebacks and prevent this epic collapse at the end. And then you're seeing these, really egregious miscues on his part. And it was so uncharacteristic that I think it makes it seem like his season was way worse. Numbers-wise, other than those turnovers, were not that much different, as you mentioned. You're looking at passing yards, and that's always going to be pretty good when you've got guys like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown out there. They're always going to make you look good. But when you watched it with the eye test, I felt like he just wasn't on the same page. The turnovers are the quantitative version of that. That's the numerically I can look down. Obviously, he wasn't on the same page. He had 20 turnovers. But when the connections, it just seemed like everything was just either a heartbeat off, just everything was a little bit off, and that was probably symptomatic of one of the reasons for the collapse. Everything was just a little bit off. One step short, one step long, one step to the left or the right. Everything just seemed a little bit off. So it was not a good year for him by his standards. It was not a good year by general standards. But I think that if you don't believe Jalen Hurts is going to bounce back, like what are we doing? If you don't believe in your quarterback to be able to turn back to a guy that was in the MVP conversation, then I think that you need to reevaluate everything, because I don't know how you can feel that.
And at times last season, Jalen just didn't look healthy. He looked slower. Looked like, obviously, he wore the knee brace for a short period
tentative.
of time. Yeah, but he just did. He looked tentative. That's a good word for it. And how much of that was his offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson? We'll find out this season with Kellen Moore, hopefully instituting a new offense with maybe some more designed plays to get his playmakers open in space. And we'll get into the coordinators later on in the show before their 1 o'clock press conference. But we still want to hear from you. Do you trust Sirianni? Do you trust Jalen Hurts? 610-632-0975. You can call or you can text. We're now going to go to Bill from Utah, who wants to talk about Sirianni. What's up, Bill?
Hey, how you doing? So here's my take on Sirianni. It's a little outside the box, but hear me out. The guy's playing with a double-edged sword this year. If he starts out bad, he's gone. If Jalen Hurts starts out bad, who do you think you're going to get rid of first? Him or Sirianni? So he's double-edged sword. And I personally believe that Bill Belichick, if Sirianni or Jalen Hurts has a horrible start, but there's a secret handshake deal that says, hey, sit back, relax a little while. If we start out not so well, but one of these guys just pick up where they left off, you're our guy.
Interesting. I don't know. I don't know if there's a secret handshake deal for Bill Belichick to come here. But people are probably wondering why Bill Belichick is just sitting out there jobless. He's going to do some television, but they're wondering how in the world that happened. I would be surprised if a guy like Bill Belichick, and maybe he is desperate to get back into the coaching game. I think that he is a lifer, but he's going to come in where the coordinators are already set. That is not a Bill Belichick move.
No, and Bill Belichick is not a Jeffrey Lurie move, in my opinion. You look at Jeffrey Lurie as the owner of this team. He just celebrated his 30th anniversary. He prides himself in finding that diamond in the rough, the unknown coach. Look at the history of who he hired. Nobody knew who Nick Sirianni was. Nobody really knew who Doug Peterson was. We did because he was a quarterback here. Nobody knew who Andy Reid was.
Yeah, that's the biggest one.
They found a quarterback's coach in Green Bay that when he was hired, people are thinking, who? Really, the only time that Jeffrey Lurie chased the shiny object was Chip Kelly, and it was a disaster for this organization. And there's another thing. Lurie likes hiring offensive coaches.
Yeah.
So Bill Belichick, to me, is not a Jeffrey Lurie type move. They're not going to give a coach that much control. They don't want a retread, and they don't want a defensive coach.
Yeah, it's a move of a team that we are so close to the Super Bowl, and we just need a coach to put us over. And I don't know that they feel like that he is the guy to get that done, which is incredible to say how many Super Bowls you have. But I think here it doesn't seem to fit here. It was a popular thought, when Belichick was ousted in New England, and then there was the talk about Nick Sirianni. Oh, maybe Bill Belichick can come here because everybody's thinking you just need one little piece. This is a Super Bowl team the year before. They lost their way. Maybe this coach can get them on the right track. I think that is a very good narrative for a lot of places. I don't think it's the narrative for here. For all the things you mentioned as well. Jeffrey Lurie not wanting to really kind of have a coach out there that's like Bill Belichick who needs a lot of control. But to that, him coming in midstream, which really surprised me. That's just not a move that he would tend to make. He likes to have a lot of control. He likes to hire his own coordinators. He calls the defense. He certainly has player personnel decisions. It would be very surprising to me. But maybe that he's in a place where he'll just take any job.
Yeah, I just think the Patriot way is dead. I don't think that works anymore in the NFL. But we're going to continue the Eagles conversation because the coordinators are talking at 1 o'clock today. But we're going to switch gears after the break as well because if you didn't know, we got a baseball team in town that has the best record in Major League Baseball. So we'll do some Phillies when we get back. I'm Bill Colarulo in for Bob Cooney along with the one and only Amy Fadul. We'll be right back. morning, everybody. I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob Cooney today, along with Amy Fadul. We spent the first hour doing a lot of Eagles talk, talking about whether or not we have trust in Nick Sirianni. Do we trust Jalen Hurts? Because now that the roster is starting to take shape, and a lot of people think Howie Roseman had a very good offseason, well, it doesn't really matter about the offseason if in season the coach and the quarterback aren't on the same page. So Amy and I think both are kind of leaning towards we do have trust, but we need to see a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that it's a caveat of trust. And I mentioned earlier, because there is less on Nick Sirianni's plate, maybe that increases my trust. Do I trust in him to do the other things? Do I trust in him to be the CEO, the overview, the guy that's going to keep the locker room together, that's going to make the necessary adjustments on offense, put his input where it's necessary without being, maybe too much on that one. So I do trust in that. I know how the season ended, but you can't, to me, I'm not going to look at that as the only reason to have complete distrust. I think it's a trust, a tentative trust in him. I want to believe it, and I'm hopeful, and I think that he will reward people that do think that he's going to be able to bounce back. I do have maybe a little bit, if I had to choose who I had more trust in, Jalen Hurts, I have more trust in. But I'm not like all in. I'm just saying I'm maybe just a smidge more.
So we want to hear from you, 610-632-0975, as we continue the Eagles conversation. You can call or you can text, and I believe we have some texts, right?
Yeah, we do have a couple texts. So new first-time texter here from New Jersey, so I appreciate you texting in here and joining us, saying, yes, I trust Jalen. It seems like we are looking for someone to blame for last year. It wasn't Jalen's fault. Our defense couldn't stop anyone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I've said this before. I think you look at that team last year. Take out the 10-1 start. That defense was horrible all season. Even when they were 10-1, I was asking the question, is this a championship defense? And I know that it was easy to move on from Sean Desai and say, oh, well, he's the problem. It was the personnel, because things got even worse once Matt Patricia took over.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, there was the one game like, oh, this is what it's supposed to. Oh, wait, no, this is not. This is also, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I mean, Sean Desai, the coaches are always going to take the brunt of it and the excuses because they're the ones in charge, and rightfully so. Sean Desai probably would agree that he did not do a good job, but it wasn't just because that he couldn't, figure it out. He didn't have the players. That back end of that defense is one of the worst that I think anybody saw in a 10-1 start. They just outscored guys at times. You were getting beat on the outside and the inside repetitively each game, and you just kept thinking, well, I guess you're just going to have to score more points because you're not going to stop anybody that's playing against you.
And that's the thing that has me a little bit concerned with this roster that they've built, is I still think there are question marks at that linebacker position. Now, they've addressed, hopefully, the secondary with the two first-round draft pick and a second-round draft pick in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But even Jalen Carter last year, as good of a season as he had, you hit that rookie wall.
Yeah, he hit the wall.
And Nolan Smith, as excited as we were, how did they get him at 30? Really didn't contribute last year. So I'm just tempering my expectations with these rookies and expecting too much out of them as rookies. But I talked earlier in the show about Jalen Hurts. The big difference for him from 2022 to 2023 was turnovers. Well, that was also a huge difference for the defense when you looked at takeaways. In 2022, they had 27 takeaways. That number dropped to 18 last year. So you had a team that had a +8 turnover differential in 2022, a -10 turnover differential in 2023. That's a big part of why the season didn't go the way we were all hoping.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at it, and that could be something that covers up a lot of stuff, but it also increases your belief into a team. You mentioned earlier, is this a championship team when you're looking at a team that starts 10-1? But the questions were there because of things like that, because you're looking at the eye test. You're watching these games and thinking, this is not, what am I seeing right now? What am I actually looking at? Am I looking at a team that's going to be able to take that next step when it comes to the playoffs? And when the level of competition increases later in the season, we all know where that they had that juggernaut of a chunk of the season. And it's like, okay, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Niners, that's when you're really going to test your mettle. And they showed exactly who you thought they were going to be, because it was fool's gold in the start of that. It was just so epic in the way that the collapse happened. It was like watching a car wreck. You just couldn't stop it.
Well, what's not a car wreck right now are our Fightin' Phils. But before we turn over to the Fightin' Phils conversation, Nick from Riverside has a point he wants to make on Jalen Hurts, and then I want to turn it over to the Phillies. But what's up, Nick?
So, yeah, I'm calling about Jalen Hurts. Just a couple things that have always made it a little hard for me to trust him. One thing is just how much he runs. It's always made me just a little hard to trust him because, a lot of quarterbacks that run that much, it's always a risk of injury. And then just one more other thing, when you guys talk about turnovers, his deep threat accuracy has never been all that good, in my opinion, and that has always caused interceptions. And also with the running, the fumbling was also an issue last year. So that's a couple things that have always made me not able to trust him very much.
Appreciate the call, Nick, and you make good points. Obviously, the fumbles are a problem, and that was a problem last year. You go back to 2022, fumbles were an issue as well. He just didn't lose as many fumbles.
Exactly.
You put the ball on the ground, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But to the point about the running, this is an interesting stat that I found, and I've talked about this before on one of my weekend shows. As much as we don't want Jalen Hurts to run because you don't want him to get hurt, he has 20 losses in his career. 16 of those 20 losses came when he had 10 or less carries. When he has more than 10 carries, he's 16-4. When he has more than 13 carries, so 14 or more, he's 10-0. So I know we don't want him to run the ball 14 times a game, but when he does, they win.
It's a necessity for him. And I think I hear what Nick was saying because you're going to the likes of like a RG3, and that's not good because you do open yourself up bigger, faster, stronger. I think physically we can agree that Jalen Hurts is bigger, faster, stronger than RG3. But, yeah, there is a concern, but there's always going to be an injury concern. You just want to limit it. But I think for Jalen Hurts to be successful, you cannot take the ball out of his hands as far as running. It's just not a realistic expectation for him. Your stats back it up. He looks more comfortable. He feels more comfortable. You run some of those plays. I think where some of the lack of trust can come in is when it's seen more as a desperate move. Instead of a designed run play, or maybe the second option was a run play, it seemed like everything else broke down. Now he has to take off. That's when the fumbles come in because it's not a secure type of feeling for him. So I think you have to set him up for success in that regard. But I think trying to take away his running ability is just not a realistic option if you want to have a successful Jalen Hurts. I think there are ways to work in the run as part of his kind of dynamic and to do it in a smart way. But I think if you take it out, you're limiting him, you're hamstringing him to that regard. I think when you see him run and it's just a takeoff because he's had check down everything else, and that's when you worry like, oh, now he's really opened himself up and the pockets collapsed, and that's when injuries can happen. So I think there's a difference there. There's a nuanced part to his run.
So we've been talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and whether or not we have trust in Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts. But there's a team I think that the city has a ton of trust in right now, and that's our Philadelphia Phillies because they still have the best record in baseball. They did lose yesterday, but after the game, Kyle Schwarber talked about how they were only one swing away and how they expect to win every single game. Their confidence is at an all-time high. Listen to Kyle Schwarber after they lost 5-3 to the Blue Jays yesterday.
I don't think you're going to look around the room and see any happy faces, right? Everyone's disappointed after a loss. It doesn't matter if, we're 10 games above 500 or 10 games below 500. A loss is a loss. And our expectation every time we walk out of the clubhouse is try to win the game. We're expecting to win the game. And I think that's the mindset you have to have, especially in this game when you play so many of them. It's easy after the fact to kind of look at it and be like, well, it's a loss. But, I don't think anyone's happy about it. There was definitely a lot of things that we could have done better, but possibly executed on more, but it is what it is. And like I said, we kept fighting. We were one swing away and against really good pitchers. So, yeah, that's the positive thing, but just got to keep fighting.
So that was Kyle Schwarber post-game. Amy, so this is a team, that's the first time they've lost at home in 24 days. They had won 11 straight. They have the best record in baseball, and you hear Kyle Schwarber talking, we expect to win every game. We're not going to be happy, even though it's only one loss. How impressed have you been with this team?
Yeah, it's obvious. Are you kidding me? People are surprised when they lose, and that's the opposite. And we were talking to before the show about how when things go well, everybody kind of gets on board. There is one reason why they did lose, and it's because Ray Dunn was not at that game, and Connor Thomas was at that game. So yes.
I like this spin. I love this spin.
So there was a time here a long time ago that if Ray showed up the game, they thought Ray had been responsible, I think, for at least 8 of those 11 home straight wins.
Something like, I think 7, because I think 3 of my 10 were,
losses.
No, we're out in San Diego.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So
That's
a 7-game winning streak for me at home.
But so thank you. You need to get back. So
Next homestand, I'll be out there. Don't worry.
They have the Mets coming back. But I think it's interesting that Kyle Schwarber said that when he said, "Oh, we're not going to hang our heads." I mean, we are going to hang our heads. Like, no one's happy about it because it is such a long season. You can think like 162 games. If you lose one in early May, does that really bother you? And the answer was yes, it does bother us because they really feel like they're in it. So we play this game at work, and it's just, I play it, and it's like, oh, how many runs are going to score if they have no outs and at least 2 on runners in scoring position? And it used to be the answer is 0. But now the confidence level across the board, you go around and ask people 2, 3, because of how this team is constructed. It was disappointing for them and that not to get more because the bases were loaded. But I think that they all felt that. They all felt, even in that 9th inning comeback, like that we've got this. We're going to be able to do it. It didn't work out today, but it gives us confidence going forward that we can get this done. And I think that that is something. We had a caller the other day who was like, oh, you're just being cocky. There's a difference between confident and cocky. I don't think that they're cocky. I don't think the Eagles fans are cocky about the excitement for their team. So why can't Phillies fans be, confident, right? You can be confident without being cocky. Phillies fans can feel themselves a little bit right now.
Yeah, and I think the Phillies, going back to spring training, they have a different mindset this year. Topper talked about it in spring training. They've all talked about it, how they wanted to come out to a quicker start. They wanted to win the NL East this year, and I think you're seeing it in the way that they're playing. They're on pace for 110 wins this season. So my question to a lot of people is, have your expectations changed for this Phillies team? Because I know a lot of people going in, yes, they thought this team could go back to the World Series, but not a lot of people thought that they had a chance to catch the Braves and win the NL East. But now that we've seen almost a quarter of the season, and they're playing as well as they're playing, and you have to factor in the injury to Spencer Strider for the Atlanta Braves, have your expectations changed with regard to this Phillies team?
From the beginning of the season to right now, yeah. I mean, in the fact that I think that it'll be not a knockdown, drag out to the wild card. I think that's where my expectations have changed. The expectations are to win the NLDS and to win the NLCS. I feel like those are an easier thought process for me. It used to be like, wow, it'd be really great. Like, let's just get back to the postseason, see what happens. No, that's not my expectation. My expectation is like, yeah, we will see how it goes in the NLDS and the NLCS. That's where my mind's at because of the way this team is. And running it back, I think there was some thought of like, oh, it was last year, and you're having basically the same team. Well, yeah, the team was also very good last year. Maybe they didn't perform at times, and you had some injuries to play into that. But Bryce Harper getting off to the start that he has, it's sooner than he usually kind of ramps up, whether that was precipitated by the Trey Turner injury or if it was just always going to happen in late April for him this year. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's happening. He came into that game yesterday having a homer in 3 straight games and 10 RBI in 3 games. First player to do that for the Phillies since Bryce Harper did it in 2019. And his frustration level with that last at-bat, his frustration level, I think, was really – it was with that at-bat at the very end where he threw the bat and it rammed into the dugout. But he had ended the inning 3 different times with the opportunity to keep it going. I think for a player like that of his caliber and the way that he is such a battler, that stuck in his craw. That really got to him.
Yeah, Bryce Harper, I mean, what he's done, the flair for the dramatic that he has.
He's a red light player.
It's incredible. It is absolutely incredible. And I made the mistake when he started out a little slow to start the season, the few games. I did a tweet saying, hey, should we be concerned about Bryce Harper? He really wasn't hitting the ball well in spring training, and now he started this season. And the day I posted that tweet, that was the night he had 3 home runs.
Yeah, see? You're welcome.
Yeah. So, but I look at this team, and I said before the season that I thought that they were going to win the National League East because I looked at the way they finished last season, Obviously a slow start again last year, but then they played over 600 baseball the rest of the way out. And I thought if they can just play 600 baseball the entire season, they can have close to 100 wins and they can catch the Atlanta Braves. They're playing better than 600 baseball.
I mean, their team right now they're unconscious because even in games where you don't have a good game, like yesterday's game, where no one's really seemingly hitting, the bats come alive. You're seeing good things from Nick Castellanos at the plate, which is something you did not see even during this great start where they were 11-1 coming into that game and had won 11 straight home games. And you're thinking, wow, if this guy's not even hitting and you're still winning, and you don't have Trey Turner and you're still winning, I think that's where the confidence comes from because you were missing pieces, and Trey Turner you'll miss for another 5.5 weeks. And now you're seeing, okay, there's other guys that are stepping up. Nick Castellanos, he's rounding into a little bit more of what you expect from him. He's seeing the ball a little bit better, a little bit more patience at the plate. So I think that's when you think about the confidence of it. Now you're going in to face this Marlins team who is absolutely just in epic skid right now. But it's a divisional opponent. And the one thing that I've liked about this Phillies team that we didn't see last year is they did not play down to the level of their opponent. They did not lose 2 of 3 to teams that were below them in the standings and below them in the talent level. I think that's one thing I've liked about this team this year is teams come in, they've been struggling. They continue to struggle against the Phillies because the Phillies put them away. You need to put the Marlins away. Then you have the Mets, and then the Mets again. These are the most important games right now. I know they're most important because of the next, but they're the most important because of their divisional opponents, and you have to assert yourself right now.
And what I love is it's not as if they're only winning games because they're putting up so many runs or because they have such good pitching. They have both right now. They're top 4 in Major League Baseball in runs scored, and they're top 5 in ERA. That's a great recipe to win a lot of games in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, the Rangers going to get that done for you. I mean, here's a guy that's absolutely on a heater. And I don't want to discount Junior Marte. I would never discount Junior Marte.
We're going to get him back. We'll be fine.
You're going to be okay?
I'm going to be okay.
Okay, good.
I've learned the show is a big fan of Junior Marte.
How could you not be?
Junior Marte. But that's the thing is you have to be a fan of all these guys. And I think something positive to your point, Bill, is Christopher Sanchez. He had been a little bit of a question mark when you moved Spencer Turnbull into the bullpen and then you went with Taijuan Walker. Sanchez had just come off maybe a little bit of a middling start. And it was, was this guy? Then he comes out and he goes 7 strong for you. He had some times where he could have gone sideways for him, and then they were able to buckle down, and then he got through it, and then you saw Turnbull come through. So there's a lot of confidence. There's confidence in the bullpen, there's confidence in the starters, and there's confidence across the board in everyone to come through. Johan Rojas, I mean, that was a guy you were thinking if he just bats 200. Well, he saw that and raised me about 50 points.
So there is a lot of confidence, but to your point about how the Phillies haven't played down to their competition this year, there's a lot of people, though, who are saying the only reason why the Phillies are playing so well is because of their competition.
Right.
So when we get back, we had Jason Stark, Hall of Fame Jason Stark, does a great job reporting for Major League Baseball. We had him on the best show ever yesterday, and we asked him how much of this start is because of the competition and because of the schedule. So I'm going to play for you what Jason Stark had to say, and I want to hear from all of you. Have your expectations changed with the way this Phillies season has started, or is it just because of the competition they're playing? We're going to keep the Phillies talk going when we get back, but you can get in 610-632-0975. Call or text. Have your expectations for the Philadelphia Phillies in 2024 changed after this hot start? I'm Bill Colarulo filling in for Bob Cooney along with Amy Fadul. We'll be right back.
Fanatics.
This 11 o'clock hour is brought to you by Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. And I'm not Bob Cooney. I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob today. He'll be back tomorrow along with...
But you're a good version of Bill.
I am a good version.
You're a BC. You don't have to be anybody else.
Yeah, I am a good version of BC. So, but appreciate everybody who's listening today. Spent a lot of time talking Eagles, but we're talking Phillies right now. And we were asking the question if your expectations have changed because of this tremendous start. One of the best starts the Phillies have had in quite some time. But there are a lot of fans out there. A lot of people saying it's only because of the schedule. It's only because of their opponents. Well, yesterday on the best show ever, we had Jason Stark join the show, and we asked him about that easy schedule. This was Jason Stark.
I don't think you can ignore the schedule. The Phillies have played the second easiest schedule in baseball so far. They've only played 6 games against winning teams, and one of them is the Nationals. The Dodgers have played 18. The Braves have played 19. So the tough part of the schedule is still lurking. But the thing to remember is all these wins count. They're all in the bank. They don't go away. And that matters. The Braves and Dodgers, they're still behemoths. I think I would probably take the Dodgers over both the Braves and Phillies right now, especially with Spencer Strider out for the year in Atlanta, and with all the ace-type starters, the Dodgers are going to get back along the way. But let me just say what I've said from day one. Whether the Phillies are the best team in baseball, or whether they're one of the 3 best or 4 best or 5 best, whatever, are they a team with a chance to win the World Series? Absolutely. And when you watch them, isn't it clear that they believe that? That team just has the look, and we know it around here when we see it, don't we?
So that was Jason Stark, who joined us on the best show ever yesterday, talking about that easy schedule, Amy. But then he said that team has the look.
That's the thing. So, I mean, I get it. You can't ignore the schedule. You can't ignore that they played teams that are below 500, below them in the standings. But they've beaten those teams. These games still count in the 162. So when you do have maybe a skid, or you're taking 1 of 3 or 2 of 3, 2 of 4, that's going to help you. You play who you play, and you don't know at the time that the teams are going to be bad. You know, you can look at talent-wise. That Chicago White Sox might be the worst team I've ever seen make up an entire baseball team. I've never seen anything that bad. But that's who you're playing. The Marlins coming up. They only have 10 wins. Do you think they're going to take them light? They notoriously played poorly in Miami and against the Marlins. So you can't just see the record and be like, oh, they only have 10 wins. Well, we just mail this in. I think this lineup knows better. And the one thing I will say about this lineup is that they also know how to win in the postseason. The other 2 teams he mentioned, in the Dodgers and the Braves, we all know how the Braves have done in the postseason.
And to your point from earlier, yeah, they're playing easy teams, but they're not playing down to these teams.
Right. They're beating them.
And they're dominating them at times. So it's been impressive. So that's why we're asking you today, in light of this start, have your expectations changed? Can this team win the NL East, even though they've played easy teams? Look, Atlanta has a similar schedule. They're going to play the same amount. They haven't played as many easy teams to start the year, but we'll see how it goes. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as they say with Major League Baseball. But you can get in 610-632-0975. How you feeling about this Philadelphia Phillies team? We're going to go to the phones now because Mitch from East Windsor wants to talk about the lineup. What's up, Mitch?
Good morning, guys. How we Excuse me. How we doing?
Good, Mitch. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Thanks for taking the call. I say pleasantly surprised. This is one of the best lineups. I mean, Baum and Harper. He retires number now. He's a Hall of Famer. And when Trey comes back, it's going to be something else. This line is low. We might have like 4 guys in 100 RBIs. I don't know what you think. I think we're going to hit our way, and the pitcher's doing pretty good, to say the least.
Thanks for the call, Mitch. I mean, you're not wrong when you talk about this lineup. And he says, one of the biggest surprises, and that was something else I wanted to talk to you about, Amy, is surprises. Because we expect Bryce Harper to be Bryce Harper. You expect Schwarber to hit home runs. But what has surprised you the most about this Phillies team through about a quarter of the season?
I mean, he mentioned Alec Boehm there. That's a guy that has not surprised me. That's a guy that has been earmarked maybe the last year or 2 ago as a guy that has the potential to win a batting title, and you're seeing that come to fruition. Maybe the surprise is that it's coming a little bit earlier than people might have expected, but I think that he's hitting exactly how you want. I think that the only surprise for me, it has been, and it's not even a big surprise, is the consistency across the board, just for everybody. We just mentioned this. when somebody may be struggling, there's so many other people to pick him up. This is not a team where it's based on one or two players. It's 5 and 6 guys. And even when guys are out and going down or they get the day off, you've got like Cody Clemens come in. I mean, the other day had a home run and a triple.
Yeah, that was supposed to be a down game. Would they put up 10 runs?
Yeah. He has 9 at-bats, and he's had 2 home runs. It's just incredible. And you have a guy like Whit Merrifield who came through the other day, and then Amendo Sosa who hits for average. That's the thing that it's like it's surprising's too strong, but it's like pleasantly surprised. Like, yes, this is what I expected because I wanted them to do well, and I wanted them to show that they, the back of their card, so to speak, is exactly who they were. But to see it across the board, the Johan Rojas's, the Brandon Marshes, you know what those guys can do. You know what Brandon Marsh can do, and he's doing it. You know what Alec Boehm can do, and he's exceeding those expectations. And then you look at Bryson Stott. I think his trajectory now is so much higher than maybe what even the most optimistic. You thought he was going to be a good player. He's turned out to be a very good player. We all know what he can do at that shortstop position. I think we talked about, I don't think you mess with that. I think the mojo you've got going. But he's been able to fill in at every spot that you've ever put him at and then answer also at the dish. I think those are huge accomplishments. And now that Nick Castellanos appears to be figuring some things out, it's like, well, okay, so where's the weak link? Rojas? No, not the weak link.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Castellanos because one of the things that has surprised me is that they are 26-12 with Nick Castellanos barely batting 200 for a majority of the season. The fact that they've been able to do that just goes to show the level of consistency they're getting from the other bats. And the other thing that has surprised me isn't that Ranger Suarez is pitching well because I expected that. He didn't have any issues this offseason. There was no World Baseball Classic. There was no issues with him and his citizenship or whatever it was. Didn't he have
coming in the country? Yeah.
Coming into the country. But it's how well he's pitching. I mean, he is Cy Young status right now.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about sustainability a lot, and Ranger Suarez, that's not sustainable. But is it sustainable for him to pitch as well? As far as they've won 7 of his starts. He's 6-0. His ERA is minuscule. He makes fielding that position look like it's the easiest thing in the history
he's so
of the
cool,
world.
Isn't he?
So it's how he finishes. It's so great. He's like squares up right to the batter so he can just flick that little glove out in case there's a comebacker. But no, I mean, this is a guy that showed you he had this in the bag that he could pull from. He has shown glimpses of this. Last year, I think it derailed a little bit. You saw it 2 seasons ago. So getting back there, it reminded you of who he could be. This level that he's at, you've got a 1-2-3 punch that is really impressive. And then you go even to the back half rotation, and you had Taijuan Walker, which was a big question mark. And then he comes out and shows you that, yeah, he still is a guy you can rely on. Christopher Sanchez, who had a little bit of a troubled start 2 starts ago, comes out and shows you that he can get out of jams. And then you go to the bullpen. So there really aren't as many questions as you have. And I know right now everybody's saying, like, oh, it's you played against bad teams. And, of course, you're hitting because you're going against bad pitchers. No, you're going against pitchers that are major league pitchers. You have to beat the teams that are in front of you, and they're beating them soundly. The Marlins and the Mets series will tell me a lot more. And I know, again, record-wise, not important, but to me, it's the team that you have to beat because it's a divisional opponent.
Yeah, that's a good point. You got to win those divisional games, and they've struggled. You mentioned it earlier. They haven't necessarily played the Marlins that well.
The Marlins could go one. They could come into that whatever series having not won a game in a month, and as soon as they see the Phillies, like, oh, we got that. I have no idea why that is. They were the bottom dwellers for the longest time, and the Phillies just roll in there. Maybe it's a South Beach thing. I don't know. I can't figure it out, but they can't beat that Marlins team with consistency.
Yeah, you mentioned Taijuan Walker, and obviously there's been a little bit of a debate. Should they have moved Spencer Turnbull to the bullpen or not with how well he was pitching? Mm-hmm. We're talking about in Howie we trust, in Topper we trust with these decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a decision that's not completely on Rob Thompson. The contract that you have for Taijuan Walker does not dictates that he is a guy that you give a little bit more leeway to as a starter. You sign him as a starter. His money says that he's a starter. Until he shows you with his stuff that he's not a starter, you ride that train. And he has done as well as you could have expected coming off the injury that he's had and some of the issues that he's been dealing with. Until he shows you with his stuff that he needs to go elsewhere, then I think that you stick with him as the starter. Spencer Turnbull, his ERA was 1.3. He was 2-0. It was amazing. he's a guy that you could rely on if something happens with either Christopher Sanchez or Taijuan Walker, injury-wise, or that they lose a little bit. That's nice. You want to keep him stretched out. That's why I think they went to him the other day. They tried to go to him earlier, and then Sanchez dealt better than I thought that they expected in the sixth. So I think that was a good sign for going forward. But no, I do trust Rob Thompson. I think that he does make the moves that make sense for the team, given everything. But that's not I can't imagine that's a completely Rob Thompson decision to have a guy that you're paying that kind of money to. Taijuan Walker doesn't come off the IL and go immediately to the bullpen.
Yeah, contracts, unfortunately, do have to play a part in some decisions at times. And another big contract player, Trey Turner, was having an MVP caliber season, and then now he's injured, probably out for 6 weeks. Do you think they could overcome that?
I mean, they have. That's what's interesting. When the Phillies were riding so high, and you're thinking, oh, wow, something's going to happen, and the shoe drops. Trey Turner goes out with that injury on the hamstring, legging out that third from home on the steal. And it was, oh, no. Then they come back and win the next day. And then they win the next day. And then they win the next day. And I think, if anything, maybe that was one of the precipitating factors for Bryce Harper kind of digging in. I think he's always at that level. It doesn't mean that he has to dig in and be like, well, now's the time I have to perform. But I think it's always there at the surface level. But I don't think that there is probably much question that he probably looked around and thought, oh, we just had a guy that's hitting almost 350 go down, generating all these runs. All right, now everybody needs to pick it up. Not just me. Everyone needs to get their stuff together, because you're losing a giant bat like that, and they haven't really skipped a beat. We'll see if that remains to be the case with these next 5.5 weeks or so, but I think they can, given the fact it's not just a 1 or 2 person team. You do have 5 and 6 guys that can perform and come through.
Yeah, that lineup is so deep, but so unfortunate for Trey Turner. Batting .343, had 9 RBIs, 2 home runs. It just looked like he was really starting to come into his own. It was the best we've ever seen Trey Turner in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform. I just hope that missing 6 weeks doesn't affect him at the plate, doesn't affect his psyche at all. But when I look at this Phillies team, it's easy to say they don't have any weaknesses. But when we get back, I want to talk to Amy and I want to talk to you about, well, what weaknesses do they have? What are we concerned about? Because it is a long season. And the beauty of baseball is, because it's such a long season, over the course of 162 games, those weaknesses start to show their head. That's just why baseball is as long as it is. So when we get back, we're going to turn our focus to, well, what weaknesses do we think the Phillies have that need to be corrected? And we want to hear from you. 610-632-0975. You can call or you can text. Talking about the Phillies, have your expectations changed? And what weaknesses do you think they have? I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob Cooney along with Amy Fadul. We'll be right back. In Major League Baseball, even after losing their first game at home in 24 days yesterday. But we're asking the question, do they have a weakness? So I'm Bill Colarulo here with Amy Fadul today. Bob's got the day off. He'll be back tomorrow. But Amy, as good as this team is, as dominant as they have looked, and we talked about it, yeah, it's been an easy schedule, but they're not playing down to their competition. Do they have a weakness?
Maybe that is it. Maybe the weakness is not inherent in the team, but it's the fact that they haven't been as tested as we would like at this point in the season. I don't look at the team and say, go line by line and think, okay, let's look at this 26-man roster and who's the odd man out, who's the weak link. I don't look at it like that. I look at the general overview, and if there is a weakness or there's a concern, it's that maybe the level of competition hasn't been there yet through no fault of their own. So that's why I don't know if I can call it a weakness so much as it is like, all right, well, they need to play against better teams. They're going to do that. It's a very long season at this point. So maybe that's the only think of like, well, I don't want to get lulled into thinking this team is better than they are, but I look at everything about them and their makeup, and then you see the stats. It's hard not to see the confidence. You heard it in Kyle Schwarber's voice when he said, we expect to win. We come out, we're no one's happy right now because we lost this game. We were one swing away from getting right back in this one and taking this game and winning this game. They expect to win, and I have that expectation now. The only thing is I want to see it, I want to see it against the Braves. I want to see it against the teams that are going to be in the postseason, that are going to be vying for their divisions. That's the only thing that for me.
And I've seen some fans, and I think this is because they have so little weaknesses, are asking, are they peaking too early? Are they peaking too early? And I hate that argument. Would you rather them lose these games?
Yeah. Did you like last year when they kind of like slept through April and a little bit of May?
But when I look at this team, and this is, look, we're reaching for things because they are playing so well. But you look at how the NLCS ended last year, where the bats went completely cold. And one of the concerns you could still have with this lineup, and again, this is looking for weaknesses, they do strike out a lot. They are top 10 in Major League Baseball in strikeouts. Is that something that could come back to haunt them? Possibly, but you look at a guy like Kyle Schwarber, strikes out a lot, but he's going to hit a ton of home runs. So it's just the nature of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sport that's based on non-success, right? A 300 hitter has failed 70% of the time, and it's still a pretty good guy. But I look at the hot start, and when people think about the reasons for this, the reasons they're getting off to these great starts in this season and in these games, is those first inning runs. They have 38 first inning runs. That leads all of baseball, and it's not even close. And you're thinking, all right, well, going into yesterday, they played 37 games. So it's basically they're spotting themselves a one-run lead every single time. So when the pitcher comes out there for his second inning, his team's already gotten him a run. I think so when people talk about Kyle Schwarber, should he be the leadoff guy? Well, he's got home runs. What Topper said once was better to start 1-0 than with a man on. Yeah, it's a joke, obviously. You want to have a guy that's always going to get on base. But I think that the strikeouts don't bother me in the fact that I think they're smarter versions of the way that they're approaching the plate. You're not seeing guys swing. Castellanos is a reason for some of those. He struggled a lot, and he would swing at pitches out of the zone, completely out of the zone.
Almost out of the ballpark, the things he swings at.
They would drop, and you're thinking, that is a foot off the plate. What are you looking at? But he was struggling. So I think that some of that is a little bit inflated by his struggles at times to start the season. Now you see him, 2 for 4 yesterday, is coming through, seeing the ball, a little bit more patience at the plate. I imagine those strikeouts will plateau. I don't mind strikeouts if it's a good pitch. Sometimes you're just going to get good pitches and you're going to miss them. I feel like they've seen the ball as well as they can. The strikeouts will probably plateau for me.
Do you have any concerns about Sirianni Dominguez? And you look at him in the bullpen. He's pitched 13 1/3. He's given up 16 hits, 11 earned runs, and he just looks like something's off. And I think if this team has these aspirations of making a postseason run, which I think that they should, and a lot of people obviously agree with me, Sirianni Dominguez has to be the Dominguez of old.
Yeah, you need to see him hit that velocity and find and locate those pitches. It's great that he can throw 101, but if he can't locate it, doesn't really matter. you've seen glimpses of it, and I think that's why they keep trotting him out there in certain instances. They want him to harness that again. His stuff is there. Location has been off. And then when he leaves something up, obviously people have made him pay. It was hard to watch his last outing because the whole time he was off. There wasn't any part of that outing that I thought, oh, he's going to figure this out halfway through. Oh, he's going to get this batter out. He would have one pitch that was good, and then the next five would be off, like just either off of what he wanted them to do, wanted the ball to do, or what he was trying to get the batter to do. And to me, like, that was a miscommunication a little bit on that. You also saw a pass ball, and it's just like, okay, the wheels are going to come off if they don't stop this right now. So that's if there's a weakness, I don't know. If there's a concern, yeah, it would be Sirianni out there in the bullpen. The good news is there are other bullpen arms. I think they will keep going to him until he forces that hand. He's a guy that they have relied on and can rely on in the past. They need to see that from him again. Maybe it's a certain tweak. Maybe it's something he needs to work on with either just trying to find that location and they can get on the right page. But, yeah, there's some concern there, I would think.
And I would say another weakness is Ray Dunn can't go to every single game. So this team doesn't win when Ray Dunn's not in the building.
Factual.
Ray, what other weaknesses you see with this Phillies team?
I mean, you go with it when you talk about Dominguez, but I look at right-handed in the bullpen right now. You've got Hoffman. What behind him? Kerkering, shockingly for the stuff he has, is not generating a lot of swing and misses, which is something that, early on in the season, we can see that change. That trend can change a little bit, but that's something to keep an eye on because you would expect more out of him there. Dominguez and his inconsistencies is frustrating, and this is such a minute weakness considering we're months away from the trade deadline, and this is a team we expect to compete for a World Series. But it is something a year ago we thought, okay, hey, what might they add at the deadline? Well, they'll add a bullpen arm because they'll add a bullpen arm. That didn't materialize. You added Michael Lorenzen, who could have been that type of guy, but you just didn't see him a lot in the postseason. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, another high leverage right-handed reliever, and that could be in your organization right now, but we don't know that yet. A little bit in terms of a concern would be maybe a little bit more pop coming off of that bench. But again, in a world where we have DHs, how much am I really concerned about that? You just have a lot of light-hitting guys, whether you look at, two of your outfielders. Marsh has found more pop this year, which has been great. But you look at the left field of Marsh, the center field of Rojas, and you say, okay, what do you got behind him? Merrifield not giving you that pop. Pache not giving you that pop. So there's probably a little bit of concern and weakness, and maybe when we see different pitching, or again, when they morph into a little bit more come this season. But those, again, are such small things to be talking about. I made the point yesterday. We were debating a fifth starter. We're talking about who should be the 26th man on this roster. Things are going so well, and it's in part because of that schedule. But I think we do see very, very small weaknesses right now with this team because things have been so great. And even as a critic of Taijuan Walker, if I want to go weaknesses, I see more of his numbers right now being indication of him being left in too long coming off of injury. I think if he's not left in those games, San Diego, I remember seeing him give up that 3-run homer. It's like, well, he shouldn't be in this game right now, coming right off the injury. Last game, again, more runs in that last inning he's in there. It might be just time to see if he can go those 6 innings and hand it over to a bullpen that, you got a lot of guys who kind of need work. It's funny, we talk so much about, well, don't overwork them. But the way the starting pitching staff has gone compared to the rest of baseball, it's a bullpen that's been worked less than most around the league.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. You're right with the things that we are debating because we are reaching for weaknesses. But when we get back, we're going to be joined by Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer, who does a great job writing about Philly sports. We'll talk to him about the Phillies. We'll get into a little Eagles with him as well. So don't go anywhere. When we get back, Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer. afternoon, everybody. Officially afternoon here on The Fanatic. I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob Cooney today. He'll be back tomorrow. I'm along with Amy Fadul. Having a fun show. We spent a lot of time talking Eagles, talking Phillies. We'll do some more Eagles talk later on in the show because both coordinators are going to be speaking, we think, at 1 o'clock. We know the Eagles are notoriously late with those press conferences, but we'll bring it to you live here on The Fanatic. But now, on the Comcast Business Hotline, we're going to go to our man Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer to talk all things Philly sports. What's up, Matt?
What's going on, guys? How you doing today?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Amy.
Hard not to be doing well right now with these fighting Phils. I know they lost yesterday, but how impressed have you been with the Philadelphia Phillies start?
For sure. I mean, yeah, you can't win every game, so it's like you're talking about how good they are after they lost, but that's the reality of baseball, that you're going to lose. They still have the best record in baseball, which is insane. Like I don't. Obviously, we expect them to be good. You expect them to be a contender for the pennant, but not expect them to have, the best record in baseball in early May. But that's where they are. And are they as good as that record? Probably not. But they're still a very good baseball team. And it's strange to see them get off to a good start just because we're used to them not getting off to a good start. And this is the point where you're used to preaching, like, it's early, it's May, it's not Memorial Day yet. Settle down, they'll be good. There's an extra wild card spot. They're going to make the playoffs. But now I think you can start talking yourself into 100 wins. And that's where I didn't think that was a 100-win team at the start of this, but that's how you win 100 games. You have to get off to a good start. You have to beat up on bad teams. And that's what they're doing. So the most impressive part about this is the starting pitching all the way through. Every night it seems like they're getting, a quality start, if not better. And that's how you string together wins. That's how you win 100 games in a season, is every night having a chance to win.
So, Matt, you've covered the Phils before. Now you do an amazing job with the features. I'm going to get your thoughts on one of the features that I just loved over the weekend. But when you were covering the Phillies to now looking at it as both a guy that, can go out there and do the story on the Phillies and then look at it as an observer, the rest of us, does it feel different around it? Is it more of a cohesive team for you from what you've seen before?
Yeah, I think it is. It's weird. Like, it doesn't feel that much different because I guess maybe because it's like the same parts are there. Like it's the same guys for the most part. But I think the difference is and you even have the same two at the top of the rotation that you've had for 5 years now. So like that's the same. But I think it's the depth in the starting rotation. Like Ranger Suarez becoming a bona fide top of the rotation arm at your 3. 4 and 5 being reliable and dependable guys, and I don't think they've had that before. Like they had 1 and 2 were solid for a while, but then you didn't know what you had at 3, 4, and 5, and now you have that. And also, you have at least something with your best player goes down, or one of your best players goes down, and there's at least some options there. You're not scrambling it. Who's going to play second base right now, or who's going? How are you going to cover for shortstop without Trey Turner? Where they have options at various positions. They're a deeper team than they've been in the past, and the stars are always going to be stars. They're going to play like stars, and that's what they're doing.
And Matt, as good as this Phillies team has been, and they've been impressive, a lot of people still wonder: are they better than the Braves? Are they better than the Dodgers? How do you think they compare to those two teams?
Well, the Dodgers are missing Spencer Strider, and I think that's the Braves are missing Spencer Strider, and I think that's huge. You take away Zach Wheeler from the Phillies, and how much of a loss would that be? And I think that one difference can make the Phillies a better team than the Braves. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, who's the best team right now in May, or who's the best team in a 162-game season. It's who's the best team in a 5-game series in October, and you line up in the DS against either of those teams, and I think the Phillies had the chance to be the best 5-game series team in the National League. You get to a 7-game series, a little bit different because you need the extra pitcher, and in the past 2 years, you don't have to go that far back. I don't think they had the extra pitcher necessarily to say they're a better 7-game series team than the Braves. They lined up in a 5-game series with the Braves 2 straight years, and they were by far the better 5-game series team. And that's what they've built. They've built a playoff roster, I believe, and with the addition of an extra playoff spot, they didn't build a team that can win. That's the goal, is to win the NL East. The goal is to get to the playoffs and be the best playoff team, and that's what they were the last 2 seasons. And now I think they're an even better playoff team, and by that factor, you're actually a better regular season team because you have a deeper rotation. And I think, I mean, the Dodgers, are you better than the Dodgers with Ohtani? Probably not, right? But that's on paper. I think they match up well against them. If they had to go through, they had to face the Braves and the DS, and then you have to go to the CS and play the Dodgers. And this is getting way ahead of ourselves, but I don't think there's a reason for a Phillies fan to say they have no shot. This team is just as good as those teams. Probably not as good as the Dodgers, but that hasn't stopped teams before from, doing damage in October.
Yeah, and when you're looking at it, like you said, it's on paper, and then in the games, they take on a different feel, and you can get the different, runs going, momentum going, everything like that. We've seen the Phillies go on those runs for Red October. Looking at the makeup of those guys, and I'm glad you brought up the Trey Turner injury, because that would have derailed a team before, and certainly would have derailed a Phillies team before, but it didn't, because you've got other guys stepping up. When you look at somebody like Alec Bohm, a guy that is people think that he's going to be a power hitter, and then you watch him hit, no, he's going to be a guy that can contend for a batting title. Is he a person that expected you when you first saw him coming up through the system?
Definitely. Like, you think about, he came up in 2020 as a first-round pick a couple years earlier, and it was like, when's he going to get here? And you're excited, and then he came up, and he was okay. Right? It wasn't like, he didn't take off running, and I think we accepted that that's who he was. At least I did. Like, he wasn't. He was a good player. He was a starting lineup player, but he was not a cornerstone player. And for various reasons. First, it was his defense, and then his bat just never seemed to come around, and that's fine. Not everyone's going to be a cleanup hitter. You need people to bat 7 and 8, and that's what he kind of seemed like to me. But now he's put it all together. This was a guy that in college was one of the best hitters in college baseball. Was really good in the minor leagues, and obviously he's been around for a while now. Time goes fast. He's not a young kid anymore. But he's really put it together, and this is who he was supposed to be, and now this is who he's finally being, and it's good to see that. It's a win for everybody. It's obviously a win for the player, but then you look at the coaches going back to in the minor leagues, the guys that worked with him, and then obviously the adjustments that Kevin Long has instilled in him, and it's just that's how you win championships, is that guys get better, not just in the minors, they get better at the major league level. And the two of them that have done it the most this season is Ranger Suarez and Alec Bohm. And that's how you win. Like, you can't just sign everybody and expect to win. You have to produce your own guys, and you have to make them get better even when they're in the majors, and continue that development, because that never stops. And the Phillies have done a great job this season with those two guys that are, it would have sounded crazy a couple months ago, but they're both two guys that could be in the All-Star game. And that says something, that, two guys that were decent contributors in this run, this era that we're in right now. But now they're at the front of that line, and they could be All-Stars. That's pretty cool.
We're talking to Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer on the Comcast Business Hotline. Matt, I want to switch gears for a second and talk some Philadelphia Eagles, because today at 1 o'clock, we're supposed to hear from the coordinators, the new coordinators, for the first time. What are you hoping to learn?
I want to know what Vic Fangio thinks about the Phillies. He's a diehard Phillies fan.
Yeah, he is.
So, let's see what does he think about all this. But no, I guess curious to see how is this. This is the Vic Fangio defense. We've seen the Vic Fangio defense in Philadelphia, but we haven't seen the real one. It was like some knockoff versions of people running it. So now you're going to see the guy who actually runs the Vic Fangio defense in charge. And I think there's reason enough there for optimism that this defense can be turned around in a quick year. And also, I'm curious, and it'll be asked, I'm sure, just about Hassan Reddick and what was Vic Fangio's input there, and you know, what did he think of, you know, obviously moving on from Hassan Reddick, and why? I think he'll give an answer to that. And offensively, I just want to know about Hurts. You know, how can we talk about Phillies development at the major league level? It's the same with the quarterback. And, you know, how can he continue to get better? Obviously, we goes to the Super Bowl, was great. It was great for the first, you know, X amount of games last year, and then stumbles down the stretch. But how can that get better? And how can he continue to get better? And I'm sure that'll be asked as well.
You would think that they're going to be asked, especially Kellen Moore, about meshing. Here's a coach that has called plays in the past. Now it seems like it's going to be all on Kellen Moore, and Sirianni is going to take a step back. I would think Kellen Moore is going to be asked about how that relationship. How do you think he can address that relationship that's going to not undermine his coach, obviously, in any way, but give confidence across the board as well?
No doubt. And, like, when that first happened, it was like, that's so weird that, you know, well, what does Sirianni actually do if, you know, he's not calling offensive or defensive plays? But then you look around the league, and it's almost like an emerging concept that the head coach is the CEO head coach, and it works other places. So, like Dan Campbell is, you know, everyone's favorite coach. He doesn't call plays. So there's a way to have success in that role, and it probably takes a little bit of humility on everybody's part to make it work, and everybody knows their role. But I think it can work, and Kellen Moore has been on successful teams. You know, has been running successful offenses, has been around really good players. So I liked both hires, but, you know, we'll find out really, you know, they can say whatever it is today. You're going to find out in September, you know, how good these hires actually are.
Matt, appreciate it, man. Great insights. You always do such a good job writing features for the Philadelphia Inquirer.
I got to ask about one feature, though. I got to ask you about your Jason Worth Kentucky Derby story.
I just saw it on his Twitter. That's what I was going to ask, too.
Oh, no, I read that thing on the day of. That was amazing. First of all, like, I cover and I follow horse racing, but the walk down the line, and you see Jason Worth coming out with that hair flow. Like, first of all,
yeah.
what is that whole thing like? How crazy was that?
I mean, it was great to see. So I talked to him. It was hard because I knew everybody would want to write the story.
Right.
So I got him like a month ago, or might have been longer than that, and got ahead of it. And then last week, like, everybody did write the story, and we were lucky that we kind of got him first. And he was really cool. He was great. And I obviously wanted to talk to him about door knock and about the horse. And he's like, if you want to talk about horse racing, I'll talk all day. You want to talk about baseball? Hang up right now. And then I asked the first question, and the phone disconnected. I was like, oh, my God. And I don't know Jason Worth from anybody. He doesn't know who I am. I'm like, oh, my God, he just hung up on me. I'm like, what did I do? And then he calls back. I'm like, well, that was one way to set the interview. He's like, I'm sorry, man. I was like, well, I want to talk horse race. I don't want to talk about baseball. He was so cool. He was a really good dude. It's a shame the horse did not do well.
No, it did not fare well.
The horse did not perform like Jason Worth. But there's always another race, right? So it'll be back. And it was fun to talk about him. It's been fun last summer to track down some of these 08 guys and find out what they're up to and what they've been doing since, you know, they all retired now. And Worth was the one guy I didn't want to say I didn't, like, failed to get him last summer. I just, like, fell through the cracks. And then when the horse thing popped up, I was like, sweet, I can kind of continue what I was doing last summer with the 2008 team, get him now before the Derby, and he was really cool.
Yeah, I love reading all the 2008 Joe Blanton, what he's doing, all these guys, what they're up to right now. Joe Blanton, of course, has the history with liquor somewhere in the back of his family now as the winery, but the Jason Worth story was just so cool seeing a guy like that and what we knew how he was here among that kind of horse racing and with the horsemen out there. I was like, this is crazy. And Matt, you did a tremendous job, as always, on all your stuff, but that was great. You should check it out, everybody, on Inquirer.com. It's good stuff.
Thanks a lot, Amy. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
What should we be looking for next, Matt? What are you working on now?
I've mentioned this before, but it just, you know, it's kind of in waiting right now. It's a story about Frank Wycheck, who was, he threw the Music City Miracle for the Titans. He's from Philly. And he died right before Christmas, and his brain is now being tested for CTE at Boston University. He lived the last 4 or 5 years of his life, and assuming he had CTE, living with social anxiety, the depression and headaches and the symptoms that go with CTE. And now his family is waiting for the results, and they talked about, the challenges he faced later in life and how it seemed like he was actually turning the corner before he died, right before Christmas. So there's like a lot of arms of our newsroom that are working on the project. So that's like my part's pretty much done. And now we're just waiting. I've been told it's going to be next week. I don't know if that's true. So we'll see when it's going to come out sometime soon. I don't know, but it's been good to work on it because I don't know Frank. I never met Frank, but he grew up, I'm from Northeast Philly. He's from Northeast Philly. He's from the next parish over, which is as Northeast Philly as it gets. And I just always we're proud. This guy is from my neighborhood. He made the Super Bowl, so I always was proud to say, that he was from here. But I never met him. So to write a story now about his life and a kind of a tribute to him, but also the reality of what he faced has been cool to do.
Well, looking forward to reading it, Matt. You always do a great job, and thanks for making time for us as always, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too, Matt.
So that was Matt Breen from the Philadelphia Inquirer joining us on the Comcast Business Hotline. Does a great job, Amy.
Yeah, the 08 series he's talking about, he caught up with a lot of guys. Guys that you might not, the usual suspects too, but like J.C. Romero and and Kyle Kendrick, how these guys are navigating the retirement. It's really, really good series. And now that when we talk about the Phillies and you're talking about some of the things that they're doing, it harkens back to a team that was, built to win, like the 08 Phillies, who obviously made it to the World Series again in 09, and how, there's some vibes coming back again. There's some vibes that they're doing it's the first time since 2008, it's the first time since 1993. Those are really great things to remember because those are World Series teams and teams that made it to the World Series, if not winning it, like in 93. But I think that the Kentucky Derby one is just so great because it's just such a dichotomy of a look of Jason Worth walking down with all these, the pomp and circumstance of the run for the roses, all this stuff, and here comes this dude who's and he said it. Matt has some great quotes in there. That made him more nervous than anything he's ever done in his entire life. And he's not doing anything. You're not doing anything. It's just a horse that you own running, and he's really gotten into it. But there's some really good stuff on the 08, and I know he'll do a good job with a lot of care on the Frank Wycheck story as well.
And you mentioned that 2008 team and how some of the things that the Phillies are doing right now we're comparing to, they haven't done this since 08. But let me ask you about off the field. As a fan base, we loved that 2008 team, but in a lot of ways, and maybe this is recency bias, but I'm feeling like the city is starting to love this team a little more.
I would say if you have to rank teams right now, and I'll give you the three, and I'll get Ray in on this. If you have to rank the teams, you're going to go 93. They're going to say maybe this team now, and then they're going to say 08. People loved 08 for other reasons. Winning the World Series will always get it. But and it's crazy to think about the guys that are making millions and millions and millions of dollars. They seem more blue-collar-ish or relatable. I don't know, Ray. Is that just me?
I think it's the partying. I'll be honest. They just seem like they have a lot of fun. You just seem like, I could have fun in that way.
I could drink a beer with that guy. That seems fun.
Right. And it's funny because I think part of what this goes to, I think for especially my generation, and this is something Andrew said about, I think, 2022, was I didn't understand why there was a love for 93 given my age, where it's they didn't it was a fun season, but they didn't win. Why are so many people enamored with that one compared to a team like 2008? I didn't understand that until 2022 happened. And it's now I understand the feeling of it and the feeling that a team can give you and the love that you get for a team that didn't go all the way, didn't finish all the way. I now get it. And this team, I can't say I love them more because I just parades do it for me more than anything else.
Well, as they should.
Right. But man, oh man, it's not fun.
Close.
You can't not have fun with this.
It'd be a crime if this doesn't
in
get
some
a
way,
championship.
right. In some way, shape, or form, in some iteration of this team, they need a parade because it would shut the city down. It would shut the city down regardless, but the bars would. They'd have to ship in extra beer.
Yeah, I don't know how that party goes.
I do.
I was there for a couple of their post-game adventures over at Xfinity after that playoff run. If you give them the canvas of the entire city, I'm concerned. I'm just going to say that. I'm concerned. Yeah, in a good way, in a fun way.
In a fun way.
It'll be fun. We just may not recover after it. That's all.
It is interesting, though. But people love 08. You always are going to love 08, but they love 93 more.
Yeah, I know. And if you talk to people in the media, including Bob Cooney, the 93 team wasn't necessarily as lovable to cover.
It was also kind of a blip, right? They were not very good before. They were not very good after. But they got lightning in a bottle that year.
But 1 o'clock today, the coordinators for the Philadelphia Eagles will speak for the first time. We're going to bring that to you live here on The Fanatic. Hopefully they do it on time at 1 o'clock. But after the break, I want to get into it with Amy with regard to what we want to learn at 1 o'clock when we finally hear from Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio. I'm Bill Colarulo filling in for Bob Cooney. We'll be right back. This 12 o'clock hour on The Fanatic is brought to you by Service First Heating and Air Conditioning. Get 0% financing for 72 months and a $500 rebate when you purchase a complete heating and cooling system from Service First. Learn more at servicefirsthvac.com. I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob Cooney today, along with Amy Fadul.
Hello.
Having a fun show
Good day.
today.
Good day. Talking everything. We got it all.
Talking everything. We bring it all here at The Fanatic. But now we're going to focus on the Philadelphia Eagles because we're hoping at 1 o'clock, if the Eagles are on time, which they never are.
I would think with the coordinators might be a little bit
Maybe.
closer to.
Yeah, it's usually Sirianni and Roseman who are always late. But we're going to bring it to you live whenever it comes. So me and Amy will be here until that press conference takes off. So now I want to turn the question over to, what do we want to learn from Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore? Now, let's focus on Fangio for a second. Obviously, he's been a defensive coordinator in this league for 20 years. We know the Fangio scheme. The Eagles love the Fangio scheme. They've utilized it in years past, but without the guy, they've had a cover band. Now they have the real thing. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to hear, and I don't know if we'll get it, but I'm interested to hear, though, how he's going to revolve his defense around all of these pieces they have, all of this athleticism and versatility that added to this defense with not only their draft picks, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, but you brought in a linebacker like Devin White, who's a freak athlete. You brought in Bryce Huff, who's extremely athletic. That's what I want to hear from Fangio. How are you going to use all these pieces?
Yeah, I also want to hear what he saw from the Eagles when he faced them. Is there something that he saw like, in whatever tape he's looked at and whatever like studying he's done, did he see stuff that he thought was an easier fix? A couple of tweaks here. Can he take anything away from last season, the good part or the not as good part or the really bad part? Because I think there's probably 3 sections to look at that season. Like, there were some things that were okay, things that not so great, and there's things that were terrible. So is there anything to glean from that? How much can he learn from what they did in the past, if anything? Is he even interested in carrying over anything that he saw from them? Because there is a lot of carryover in personnel. You wonder what he can take away, if anything, from that. So I'll be interested in that. I'll be interested in his dynamic. I thought Matt Breen brought up a great point about Hassan Reddick, who on paper looks like a perfect fit in what a Vic Fangio defense has looked like in the NFL. And now that he's gone, did that weigh in? How much shade did he have in who they've brought in the Bryce Huff and Devin White and then draft picks? How active is he going to be? So I think it's going to be interesting. It's probably the more questions in this town. It's interesting to me with all the talk about offense and Jalen Hurts. I think there might be more questions for Vic Fangio about what he's going to do with this defense than maybe what we expect.
And we want to hear from you. So you can get in by call or by text, 610-632-0975. As we get ready for this press conference involving both coordinators, what are you hoping to learn when they finally speak? We haven't heard from them yet. So again, 610-632-0975. Another question that I'm going to have for Fangio is how he's going to get the best out of these young players. Because everything you hear about Fangio is that he's a great teacher. That's been, for his 20-year career as a DC, it's been, he's such a good teacher. He's going to put you in the best positions to succeed. Now, this defense, we all know about the rookies. But what I think we really need to see is more out of our second and third year players. I always go into every season, you can't rely on your rookies. I know we're excited about Quinyon Mitchell. I know we're excited about Cooper DeJean and even fifth-round rookie Jeremiah Trotter Jr. If you truly have Super Bowl aspirations, you can't rely that heavily on rookies. But what you do need is your second and your third-year players to really step up. So this year, obviously Jalen Carter is one of them. Nolan Smith. We thought we stole him at 30 last year, and you really didn't see it. But with them trading Reddick, Nolan Smith's got to step up. Keely Ringo, I'm very high on him at corner. I think he has a shot to beat out Quinyon Mitchell for the other starting role. And then you look at some of your third-year players, the Milton Williams, the Nakobe Deans, the Jordan Davis. You need them to step up as well.
Yeah, Nakobe Dean is the player I wrote down as soon as you started talking about this and brought up the question. I think he's been a bigger question mark that has not been answered in any way, shape, or form that gives you confidence going forward. I know we have polls out there, and we're going to get to our poll because I think these are tied in. When you're talking about the coordinators, the confidence level and the trust you would have in Jalen Hurts is going to be tied in directly with Kellen Moore. The confidence level you're going to have with Nick Sirianni is going to be tied in with the performance of his players. So those guys that you're mentioning stepping up, Jalen Carter hitting the rookie wall, so to speak. You saw him taper off at the end. Jordan Davis giving you flashes, but not anything at the level of consistency. Nakobe Dean hasn't even given me enough to call it a flash. There's been sparks at times.
Yeah, we just don't know.
But you just haven't seen it. You really even haven't seen anything that's even a flash. And you saw it in college, and now you're waiting for it to translate. Is Fangio the guy to unlock it? It's all interconnected to me. There's going to be a lot of questions about how they're going to utilize these guys to their potential. You're looking at across the leagues when everybody takes those next steps. It is the players that kind of come into their own in their second and their third year. They become who they're supposed to be. That's why they were drafted in the first and the second rounds. That's why that they were highly touted and highly coveted coming out of college. And you saw that on tape. Now you need to see it in a game. How are these guys going to unlock it? What is the plan for? And I think you need to be specific when you're asking if it's Vic Fangio about certain players. How are you going to unlock the potential of a Nakobe Dean? How are you going to get Jalen Carter to break through for the entire 17-game season? I think you need to be very specific, and I think he'll be able to answer. Like, they'll have a plan for it. I don't think that there's any question. I'm interested to hear it.
Yeah. And I want to hear if they're going to do what you probably have heard called big nickel. Are they going to do a lot more big nickel, which is when you have one linebacker on the field and instead of bringing in the nickel corner, which we're used to seeing Avonte Maddox when he's healthy, which has been rare, you have a third safety instead. And you look at this roster and the way they've built it with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who has a ton of versatility and that ability to come down and play the nickel corner. You've added a Cooper DeJean, who I think projects more as a safety in the NFL, but can play, hopefully, that nickel corner position. And if Sidney Brown's healthy, hopefully Reed Blankenship has a really good third season. I'd love to see three safeties on the field with a really athletic linebacker. Maybe it's Devin White, where teams aren't able to completely take advantage of the middle of the field like they were last year.
Yeah, right. I mean, all you had to do was look at a couple of games and think, oh, well, I'd throw down the middle as well because you're going to get 20 yards off the bat. It's interesting you mentioned Sidney Brown. Here's a guy you're talking about taking the next step. He's been hampered by injuries, but he was a guy that fell in the draft, and you're thinking he could be a potential player, a real contributor. You haven't seen it yet. He's shown flashes at other times in his career and then has taken a step back, and that's probably been hampered, like I said, by injuries and other things. But I like the idea of these things. I want to see how they're going to be able to unlock that potential, and they have to have a plan for it, because when you're looking at last year, you saw it as well. We all saw the potential of those players, but it did not translate, certainly not in the back half of the season. But really, in the secondary, it never translated. It didn't translate in the beginning of the season or the end of it. That secondary was problematic from the jump last year, and it just came back to bite them later because it was more exposed. That's something to me. What is your solution there? Is it getting more athletic? Is it going, as you said, is it using this big nickel package more, if at all? Is it getting more athletic linebackers out there? The linebacking core has always been a question mark for the Eagles as far as high level and consistent play. Is that something that Fangio can answer for them?
And this Philadelphia Eagles team under Nick Sirianni is used to having a defensive coordinator that runs the defense. But the difference this year may be having an offensive coordinator that has a lot more autonomy than maybe Brian Johnson had last year. We kept hearing from Nick Sirianni, this is my offense, this is my offense. We know they're going to mesh the ideas. I played that audio clip for us earlier. But I'm really curious to hear from Kellen Moore what his plans are with all of these weapons. We know they still have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, but now you've added a Saquon Barkley to that backfield. And really the focus has to be on getting the most out of Jalen Hurts this season. I'm not sure Kellen Moore is going to give us all the plans and strategies, but I'm really curious to hear, well, how do you take advantage of all these weapons and get the best out of Jalen?
You have to use – the number one question for me is, like, how are you going to use Saquon Barkley out of the backfield? How are you going to give him as an outlet for Jalen Hurts? That was the big talk with DeAndre Swift. You never saw it. You never saw DeAndre Swift as that outlet. He never was that guy that caught 50 passes out of the backfield. You wanted him to be. He just wasn't. Why? I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to get that answer. I don't know if it was scheme, if it was player related, if it was both, it was situation. It doesn't matter now. That's gone. The ship has sailed. Saquon Barkley is that guy. He is a guy that can catch out of the backfield. You're going to need him to do it for your offense to run well. You're going to need it to spell your quarterback in those running situations. I know people get nervous when Jalen Hurts runs. Here's the outlet. What is your number? What number do you put on it if you do of getting Saquon Barkley involved in that passing game? Because you mentioned it. He's a dynamic weapon. He has, I think, a little something to prove after his last maybe year or two with the Giants. I think that he's a guy that you can take advantage of. All right, it's a prove-it deal. Now you can prove it. But get him more involved. I need to see him catch out of the backfield.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are questioning whether Jalen Hurts is the franchise quarterback or not. We asked that question in the first hour of the show is, do you trust Jalen Hurts? And we'll get back to that in a second. But the reason why I blame a lot of it on the play calling, the scheme, the route designs last year was because of the yards after catch. Amy, if you go back to 2022, the year they went to the Super Bowl with Shane Steichen, they had a top 10 offense in terms of total yards after catch and top 5 in average yards after catch. With pretty much the same personnel last season, in fact, you could argue that DeAndre Swift was an upgrade in terms of yards after catch from Miles Sanders. Not saying he was a better running back, but better with Yak, that yards after catch we love. They went from being top 5 in the NFL in average yards after catch to 25th in the NFL. Same personnel. Mm-hmm. So to me, what was the major difference? It was play designs and route concepts, and they only threw 5.2% of their passes between the hashes. To me, when you have this many weapons and you're unable to create space for your playmakers, to get them the ball in space, to get that yak, I put a majority of that on Brian Johnson, not Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, it's hard to – Jalen Hurts, if this was his 15th year in the league, you could probably assign a little bit more of that blame on him. Here's a guy that is running this offense as it's constructed. You can give him a certain amount of leeway. But when you're not if your gunners are just going straight down and no one's crossing over the middle, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. There's no one there for him to throw to. How many times do we look at that, especially if you're looking at the all-22 tape, and you can see how the field breaks down and it's just wide open down the middle? Why is no one there? It's not because that Devontae Smith didn't want to run there. He wasn't. That's not what the route was. That's not what was called. It's hard not to say it was Brian Johnson's fault in that regard. It's hard. I'm not going to put every single blame on him. You can't do that. I think the blame goes across the board. But percentage-wise, he takes a lot larger of a blame on those specific plays because of that. Because the middle of the field was wide open, no one is running a curl route, no one's running a crossing route, no one is coming across, and you're thinking you're just forcing Jalen Hurts into bad decisions because you're giving him only really 2 options.
Yeah, and you look at the 2 teams in the Super Bowl last year. San Francisco 49ers, number 1 in the NFL in average yards after catch. Kansas City Chiefs, number 2 in average yards after catch. So it is important. And as bad as things were in L.A. for the Chargers when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator, they still finished top 5 in yards after catch.
Yeah, I think the durability also, when I'm thinking about the makeup of those 2 teams, they have those big guys that can take the hit and keep on going. Why don't we trust A.J. Brown to do that? Why don't you trust Dallas Goedert to do that? Is it a tentative thing? Like I said, I don't know if we're ever going to get the answers as far as what went wrong with the play calling to satisfy that. But it seems like Kellen Moore is going to be much more interested in calling plays that will free up his offense and spread it out more rather than just, all right, we're going sideline, and that's pretty much it.
We're going to continue to talk about this upcoming press conference. We want to hear from you as far as what questions you want answered by these new coordinators. But when we get back, I also want to talk about the RPO, the run-pass option that a lot of fans were wondering what happened to it last year, and can Kellen Moore bring that back? I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob Cooney, along with Amy Fadul. We'll be right back. new Philadelphia Eagles coordinators, both offensive and defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, scheduled to speak to the media for the first time at 1 o'clock. So I'm Bill Collarwillow filling in for Bob Cooney with Amy Fadul, and we're going back and forth now talking about things we want to learn today or that we're hoping to learn today from these coordinators. And before the break, Amy, I mentioned the RPO, the run-pass option. Everybody remembers how successful the RPO was with Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator in the year they went to the Super Bowl. And there was a lot of questions last year with Brian Johnson as the OC as, well, what happened to it? Why aren't they calling the RPO? So I went in and I really dove into the details of the RPO, and it wasn't as if they were calling it less. It just wasn't as effective. You go to 2022. In 15 games with Jalen Hurts, they ran the RPO 148 times. In 2023, in 17 games, they ran it 171 times. Very similar.
Right.
The difference was in 2022, they averaged 7.8 yards per RPO play, and last year that number dropped to 4.8. So they were gaining 3 yards less per RPO. Defenses figured out how to stop it, and Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, they couldn't figure out the counterpunch.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's not like they were utilizing it that much less. It wasn't 20% less when you're looking at the drop. That's a bigger than 20%. It's like a almost 30% drop when you look across the board. It wasn't that they were using it less. It was that teams figured out how to better defend it. But then the tweak never came on the Eagles side. It was just,
Exactly.
well, we're just going to keep banging our head against the wall. It'll certainly start working again. Well, that's not how the league works, right? I mean, they're all professionals out there. They're all paid big bucks. They all know exactly what they need to do. So that was the frustrating part, because it's not like the RPO is not something – it's going to work again. It can work, and Jalen Hurts has run it so well. Why can't they get back there? And I think the answer is they can. I think the personnel is going to enable them to do that. And then I think also they'll be able to adjust better on the fly. That was where the disconnect came from 2022 to 2023, the adjustments on the fly. When you see that it's stopping to work after that start to the season, then teams are scheming against it. You can't just keep doing the exact same thing. They know it. They see your tendency. They saw it.
Yeah, the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And that's what I'm so excited to see from Kellen Moore, because even last year with Justin Herbert, who's not a very mobile quarterback, and the Chargers were not a very good football team, they called the third most RPOs in the NFL last year. So you don't always have to have the mobile quarterback to do it. You remember Nick Foles, they ran a lot of RPOs
Exactly.
as well. But with Jalen Hurts, it just adds that third element where they have the ability to not only read and ride the running back, they could also pull it and either throw it or run it. So I'm hoping they bring that back, because it's such an effective part of Jalen Hurts' game. And now you've added Saquon Barkley to that
Exactly.
backfield. The sky's the limit for this offense.
Yeah, I mean, and we were just talking about what you need him to do. Saquon Barkley has a lot to prove, I think, to himself and to other teams around. Oh, if you're looking for them. I always think about guys that come here on the deals like Saquon Barkley did. It's a tryout for yourself and the other teams that are watching. Barkley's going to need to be the dynamic player that we've seen at times with the Giants. He's clearly capable of it. I think in an offense that works as well as the one on paper should, with Kellen Moore running it. If you go with Kellen Moore and what he's shown at different levels in his NFL coaching tenure, it looks like Saquon Barkley is a perfect player for that. It looks like Barkley is a perfect player to fit into what they want to do and what they want to get back to. Catching out of the backfield, dynamic north-south runner, making cuts, recognizing what the offensive line is able to give him rather than just, shoving himself straight through. He's a dynamic runner in a lot of aspects, and he can just frees up your offense to do what you want it to do. I think that's the most important part. He plays a role, no matter if the ball is in his hands or not, of making sure the offense can function on all cylinders and function in the way that it's designed to.
And there's a lot of Eagles fans out there that I think have the misconception, because there's a false narrative around Kellen Moore, that he doesn't like to run the football. That's been a thing that when they hired him, I saw a lot of fans. He doesn't like to run the ball. And I think a lot of that's based off of the fact that Mike McCarthy made a quote in 2022 that said, I want to run the damn football, and all Kellen Moore wants to do is light up the scoreboard. So I went and looked. when Kellen Moore was calling the plays in 2022 for the Dallas Cowboys, they were number 6 in the NFL in rushing attempts. They had a top 10 rushing offense. They ran the ball 531 times. Well, you look at last year, Mike McCarthy, who wants to run the damn football, he only called 468 run plays. So actually less than what Kellen Moore was calling when he was in Dallas. And you look at his offenses in Dallas, top 10 in 2022 as far as running, top 10 in 2021, and they had the number 1 offense that year. So I don't think Kellen Moore is going to completely get away from the run, and you certainly don't give Saquon Barkley the money you gave him to not use it.
And that's the thing. You're going back to 2022. You're looking at the personnel they had in Dallas. It dictated that. It had to. Ezekiel Elliott, amazing. Tony Pollard,
yep.
right? These are guys that – so now you have that again. Like, yeah, we're going to run the ball. If you don't have that, you don't run the ball, and you can see it. So I think that's why it lends itself to it's going to be a good running year because of what you just pointed out. They had the personnel, and they utilized it in that way.
So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to keep monitoring the Philadelphia Eagles. The press conference should be coming live around 1 o'clock. So as soon as Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio get up to the podium, we're going to cut there. You can hear the press conference right here on 97.5 The Fanatic. This 1 o'clock hour is brought to you by Ferguson HVAC Lyon Conklin. Attention HVAC contractors. For equipment, parts, and supplies for every heating and cooling job, visit one of Ferguson's counter locations in Bensalem, King of Prussia, Pennsauken, or Westchester. Welcome back in, everybody. I'm Bill Colarulo, filling in for Bob Cooney. We're waiting for the nod from our producer, Ray, that Vic Fangio or Kellen Moore is on the podium. As soon as they are, we will go to them, but me and Amy will keep it here until the coordinators come on.
They do.
What's the over-under, Amy? How late they going to be?
I don't think it's going to be player late. Those players, when they come out, it's like 30 minutes late. I'm going to say one. I'm going to give the over-under set for 110, and I'm going to go slightly under.
Okay. I'm going to take the over on that.
All right. 110 it is. Ray, where would you vote?
So help me. Whatever it is. I'm going to go under for my sanity. Please, I'm begging you, this football team, let's put one of the core values as being on time, okay? We talk so much about the core values. Let's add that one to the list.
That's one of my pet peeves.
Punctuality.
Punctuality is so important. I've said this before on there, especially when you're going to dinner with like another couple or somebody else, and they tell you 7 o'clock, and then they roll in like 7:30. It's like
7:30. That's a completely different time.
Exactly.
7:05.
I've planned my entire day of eating around me thinking I'm ordering at 7 o'clock.
Right? At least sitting down and like having somebody address you like, yes, here's our specials.
I'll be honest, you need better people if they're showing up at 7:30.
7:30 is late.
7:05, I start to sweat a little bit.
7:10, I'm like, all right.
We might just need the table for two.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Just order an appetizer at least. But while we're waiting for Fangio and Kellen Moore, one of the things that Howie Roseman did this offseason, which he tends to do, is to add players that were high draft picks of other teams, where it didn't necessarily work out with that other team, but maybe it'll work out here in Philadelphia. And you look at some of these top 3 rounds of picks that didn't work out for other teams. They've added Kenny Pickett, who was a first-round pick. Devin White, linebacker, first-round pick. Saquon Barkley, first-round pick. Devontae Parker, wide receiver. Mekhi Becton, wide receiver John Ross. Paris Campbell, Oren Burks, LaRaven Clark, Zach Bond, Matt Hennessy, Julian Aquara, Tyrion Davis-Price, running back. People probably didn't even realize the Eagles picked him up, former third-rounder. But you look at all of these guys that he's adding, every one of them was a top 3-round pick of another team. Could this work?
I mean, the answer is it could. You want it to, and that's why you sign those guys and you bring them over. The question is why they were available. You know, they were top picks, first round, second round, third round, all viable starters. And when you're selecting in that round, and some of these guys tapped as to be, you know, the heir apparent at whatever position, like Devontae Parker. I mean, that guy was an exceptionally high pick. And to see that it fell off so quickly for him, I think there is some concern on that. But if there's anywhere you can take a place like that, like a player like Devontae Parker, it's on this team, right? You've got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith locked in. Why not take a flyer on a guy that has that potential, shows that athleticism, shows that burst, shows that speed? So it can work. You don't know. But the thing is, you just named, 12, 13 guys? Bill's going to count them up. I should have.
13.
13.
Good.
I thought, quick math in my head. So there's 13 guys. If you hit on 50%, that's a heck of a return.
See, here's my only problem. I agree with you. I agree with you that you're taking a low-risk, high-reward move because it's low risk to take these guys. But you look at what Howie Roseman did last offseason. He tried a similar thing. They picked up Rashad Penny, former first-round pick. Did nothing for you this year. Cornerback Greedy Williams. Everybody was so excited. Greedy Williams is coming here. He's going to win the nickel corner position. Didn't make it out of training camp. Justin Evans, second-round safety, started his career. It looked like it was promising, and then the injury bug got him in Tampa. Goes to New Orleans. Eagles pick him up. Where'd he finish the season? On IR, because he's always had injury problems. Terrell Edmonds, former first-round safety of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Things got so bad at safety, they had to trade Terrell Edmonds and some draft picks to get an aging Kevin Byard. They brought in Miles Jack as well, but I'm being told Vic Fangio is hitting the podium. We're going to broadcast that live right here on The Fanatic.
First, unless you want a filibuster to begin with.
What do you got?
Nothing. Go ahead.
So why Philly? Why decided to come here?
Well, it was exactly 40 years ago when I started my pro coaching career across the street at Veterans Stadium. and thought it'd be cool to hopefully end it here. So 40 years later, here I am. And a lot of things change and a lot of things don't, you know. One of the first things I've done several times, I still go to the Palladium down on Packer for my meals, just like I did way back then. And Phillies are still playing good. Okay. Although you guys didn't clobber them for losing one game yesterday, did you? Oh. Well, but no, just to come back, you know, it's, you know, my kids live 2 hours south of here. My mother lives, who's 97, 2 hours north of here. So a lot of family considerations. Philly, you know, I was a big Philly fan growing up in all sports. So it was a thrill for me to go to work every day at Veterans Stadium 40 years ago, because I used to go to games there all the time. And now it's a good thrill to come back 40 years later and hopefully finish it out here.
So you expect this to be your last stop?
I would think so, but as we all know in this business, nothing's guaranteed.
Is this your expectation to come back here when you left Miami? Did you kind of see this as an opportunity, and is that why you left Miami to come here?
Basically, yes.
So 38 years ago, when you were here a couple years ago, what were your responsibilities when you were a consultant?
Oh, in 22?
Yeah.
I wouldn't hear that often. I really helped the offense. I'd say 95% of any of my contributions were to the offense and 5% to the defense. That's basically what I was doing, educating, trying to give the offensive coaches a pre-look at the defense they're going against, what could possibly hurt them, what's their strengths, what's their weaknesses, schematically where they can be attacked maybe and not attacked, all that different kind of stuff. But it wasn't every week.
Would you have been here if the timeline of defensive coordinator openings was different last year?
I think that's a fair assumption.
We've heard a lot of people talk about your defense, but from your perspective, what are the most important elements of it?
Good players. And I'm not trying to be a wise guy with that, but, you know, we have a system that is versatile, we like to think, that, you know, it needs to be versatile because every week you're facing different strengths of an offense, different schemes. So what you play in one week 10, 15 times, you may not play it all the next week. So you have to have a versatile system for the offenses today in the NFL. And what we'll eventually do is learn what our guys are best at. You know, so I like to throw a lot at them early, because I think one of the worst things you can do is come week 3, week 5, man, we could really use this scheme, but it hadn't been introduced to the players yet. Whereas if you introduced it to them in training camp and worked on it, when you pull it back out 3-4 weeks later, there's recall. So we'll throw a lot at them in training camp to see what best fits for them, what they're good at, and then try and whittle it down. But always keeping some stuff in the bank in case we need it at some point during the season. Whoa, Bob, you got a referee here.
We'll do DJ and then Mark.
We've seen a lot of defenses across the league adopt aspects of your scheme. You know, you hear a lot about the Fangio scheme. Does it present challenges as more defenses kind of try to emulate what you do? Like, how do you handle that?
You know, yes and no. Yes, in that you see the way some teams may want to try and attack it, but no in the sense that it's not as different as it was when we first started doing it and built it. So it's yes and no.
So along the lines of getting good players and everything, like how much of an influence or a factor were you in the players, you know, they acquired during the offseason, whether it was like the free agent guys, you know, the guys they drafted, Quignon and Cooper, stuff like that?
Yeah, you know, Howie asked me to watch several players. I gave him my opinion, and then he took it from there.
When it comes to versatile players like Cooper, A lot of people projected him at different spots around the league. What's your philosophy as far as how you start guys out like that who may have multiplicity over different positions?
Yeah, there's a lot of players that physically are capable of being versatile. Where a lot of them get eliminated from being versatile is they struggle to learn and the assignments and the techniques and the execution at a couple different positions. So there's a lot of guys that are versatile physically, but can't do it mentally. You know, and I don't mean that. They're not going to get, your reps are watered down the more you're moving around. And other guys are easier, it comes easier for them than others, if that makes sense to you. And what was the second part?
Just the fact of how you start those types of players out. If you
you start them out at a primary position, and then you start giving them the secondary position, and go from there.
After you left Miami, it was suggested that you didn't get along with some of the players, that there were relationship strains. What was your perspective? What was the reality of it from your?
Yeah, I didn't see that at all, really. Anything we do, whether they're here or anywhere else I've been, is what we think's the best for the team and best for the defense specifically to stop somebody. And wherever that falls, that's where it falls.
Follow up on that. How have players changed since that day, those day 40 years ago across the street? How are they different now than they were?
That's a good question. We can stay here all day and answer that, but I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version of that. They really haven't changed very much at all. What's changed is the people around them. People are not expecting as much out of players as we used to expect. And these players will work and give you everything they got within reason. And there's too much of, you know, and that starts at an early age. You know, when they're in high school, college, everybody, you know, less is more type thing. They preserve your energy. You know, you guys hear in the NBA and load management, and I talk to coaches from other sports that I know, and, you know, it drives them crazy. But the players are willing to work. Never had an issue with that. And they're still willing to work. But we, as the so-called adults in the room, need to push them.
So how have you adapted to?
And linebackers specifically, how do you see the personnel here matching what you want to do?
Well, when you say linebacker, I think inside linebackers. Okay. I think they're off to a good start. You know, we've got Bond here who's played a little bit of inside linebacker in New Orleans. He really didn't play a whole lot of defense there, but he was inside some, more outside. We think he can play inside, and I have not seen anything so far that says otherwise. Obviously, we got Devin here from Tampa. You guys are well aware of him. He had a great career going, had a down year last year for whatever reason. You know, we hope to get him back to where he was. You know, N'Kobe's on the mend from his injuries last year. Who am I forgetting here? Keep going. Yeah, Trotter's, you know, Trotter's got to come in and join the fray, and let's see what he has. And Burks, too, you know, he's been a veteran backup. He's in the hunt, too. So, you know, we don't have anybody established as, per se, an eagle, but we've got guys to work with, and we're happy with the group so far.
To follow up on Bob's question and your response to that about the changes in the game over the 40 years, so how have you found that you have had to adapt to the limited schedule? And in fact, in here, the Eagles probably practiced as few as any team, least amount maybe last year as any team in the NFL. How will you adapt to that?
Well, you got to make do with what you got, but I keep pushing for more.
Did you push for more this offseason before coming here?
I'll let Nick answer that for you.
You think players can take that the wrong way?
Take what?
Take the pushing and
Not, again, within reason. I'm not proposing we go 2-a-days and do, what is it, North Dallas? What was the thing in Dallas?
40.
Yeah, North Dallas 40. Yeah.
In 2022, that was sort of a hiatus where you got to dive in to study and catch up.
Yeah.
I mean, just study trends and things like that. when you have a system that everybody's trying to kind of use in their own system, so do you, if you take time between this offseason, between Miami to now, what are you trying to do in terms of taking a step ahead, and how much different do you think things can be with the players that you have here?
Well, I mean, I got to first learn these players. And, I think the narrative you're painting that people are pulling stuff from our defense. They're not doing it verbatim, you know what I'm saying? Mostly. But, no, I've been super busy since I came here. Anytime you go somewhere and it's your first off season with a new staff, new players, adapting to everything, you're super busy. And, yeah, I study film. I mean, I take a couple defenses every year and break them down around the league, and, see if I can learn something. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
And with the Eagles hadn't picked a cornerback in a long time, how much was your voice in that? And for the guy like Quignon, how does his skill set help you in what you can do with your secondary?
Yeah, he's obviously got good movement. He's got good size for a corner. He's going to have to adapt to the NFL game, covering NFL receivers, NFL schemes in the passing game. There's a lot to learn. And but we think he's the right guy, emotionally and mentally to do that. And hopefully he'll pay dividends quickly rather than later. But he's going to be one of the many competing.
Having worked with Sean Desai as long as you did, what was your perspective on the way that last year went for him here?
I really don't know. Anytime it goes bad like it did, it's usually everybody has their fingerprints on it. It's not just one thing or one person.
When it comes to that, you've had that flat defender, Sam linebacker. You've had some success with that. Van Ginkel had a big year for you last year. Is that something you want, or is that something that I have this player and I kind of want to take advantage of this particular player?
His versatility you're talking about?
Well, his role. So
he obviously showed that I thought he could do it, and then he showed he could do it. So we used him that way. And then we got handcuffed through injuries. He had to play one position then. But yeah, anytime you have guys that are versatile, it helps. Helps a lot.
When you went about building the staff, the rest of the defensive staff, what was important to you?
To get good coaches. I mean, obviously some of these guys I've had some history with, but it really wasn't the history of knowing them, why they're here. I had firsthand knowledge that they're good coaches. So that was first and foremost. Joe was here, Clint, Bobby King, I didn't know from Adam till we hired him, and he's done a great job so far. So priority one was good coaches. Then if they did have familiarity with the scheme or me, that helped.
A lot of these guys you'll be their fourth defensive coordinator in in a couple years. A lot of these guys are going to have three position coaches. How much of a challenge is that to kind of start from scratch again for them?
It does add a level of challenge to it. Hopefully we'll get enough work between the off season and training camp to get through that. But there's no denying that continuity, if it's good continuity, is helpful.
Limiting exposure. Jalen Carter in your defense.
Who?
Jalen Carter.
Well, I mean, I think he's talented enough that no matter what we do with him, we'll be maximizing him. He's got to get in great shape, which I think he's off to a great start here, and so we can play him a lot.
In terms of limiting explosive plays, where do you rank that in terms of priorities?
High.
Highest?
It's high.
What about getting after the quarterback? How big is that for you?
High.
Highest.
It's high.
How about not letting the other team score? Where's that kind of rank?
That's number one. That's the highest.
You asked about Jalen Carter. What about Jordan Davis? How do you?
Same thing. He's heading into his third year. I think he's off to a good start this offseason. I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to, not having been here his first 2 years. But I think he's working good. I think he's rounding into good shape. It's up to us to give him the opportunity and platform to get in good shape and then rely on him when he leaves here and, that dead time between the offseason and camp. Well, from what I've seen so far, very encouraging.
How much input did you have with Bryce Huff, and what do you like about him that you've seen on film and otherwise?
Yeah, Howie asked us to watch him, both myself and Wash, and, we liked him. And he's been a good pass rusher for the Jets, playing in a somewhat of a part-time role. Hopefully we can make him proficient enough to where he plays more, meaning his run play, and on the occasion or two that we might want to drop him.
Last year, you mentioned, I know you were a part of it, but when the defense is trying week to week to try to solve things, and there's a lot of hands in trying to get it back on track, what from your experience, and I don't know if the Eagles ask this from you, where you can help build game plans week to week? What are your strengths there, and whenever things do turn around that you can find solutions each week? What goes into that from the defensive coordinator position?
Well, I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they weren't playing good. They had injuries, so there was a lot of moving parts. Is that what you're saying?
Finding solutions week to week.
Yeah. Basically, I'm not totally sure of your question, but when things aren't going good, you need to go back to basics. I'll tell the players early in camp that if we're struggling, don't expect me to magically scheme our way out of it during a game. We're going back to basics, and we're going to call the things that we've been practicing since day one, and we got to fight our way out of it. And if you don't have that foundation and you're always grabbing for the perfect call, you'll be okay for a little bit, but eventually you're going to get gashed.
We'll do a couple more, please.
The coverage on occasion.
What's that?
On dropping on the coverage on occasion for the edge rushers.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view on how you want to use the edge rushers in coverage?
They will occasionally drop, yes.
I think your passion for baseball is pretty bad.
What's that?
But just the Cliff Notes version, how do you, on the football coaching, not take your career for the baseball side of things?
I don't know. It's a good question. I had a great high school coach. When he retired, he was the second winningest coach in the state of Pennsylvania, Jack Henses, and played for him. And I kind of caught the bug from him for football. Because coaching in football has more of an impact on the game than baseball does in most other sports. There's no other sport where you huddle up. Now I know there's no huddles, but you're making a call every single time. So you have an important impact. And you play one game a week, so there's a lot of practice, a lot of teaching. I enjoy practice. I enjoy teaching. Coaching in football is different than baseball for sure. It's 160. I used to say before they went to 17 games, every one of our games was worth 10 in Major League Baseball. Because we had 16, they had 162. So when we lost 2 in a row, that was like losing 20 in a row in baseball. And, that kind of paints a good picture for people that don't realize that. It's just like with the Phillies here, that he's letting Castellanos fight his way out of a slump. You can't do that here. And they wouldn't do that if they were in the playoffs either. They got 162 games.
With Bo, and then we got Kellen here.
I think people would look at you and Nick and think that you have kind of different personalities from the outside. How has it been working with him every day so far?
Good. No issue. I don't know why they would think that, but.
Great. All right. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, guys.
Get to a Phillies game yet?
We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll broadcast live Kellen Moore, new offensive coordinator. Keep it right here. Moore, new offensive coordinator, spoke a few minutes ago. Here it is from the beginning.
How's it going, guys?
How you doing?
What's it like to come into a new job and have this kind of talent on the roster?
Yeah, it's been a really fun process. Through the whole process, you're kind of getting to know the personnel, and then just the way Howie's obviously handled this offseason has been phenomenal. Just, the pieces we've added to complement the pieces that are already in place. I think it's been a phenomenal setup. We're really, really excited about it.
What do you recall from your head coaching interview here, and how much was that on your mind when you took the OC job?
Yeah, really fun process. Really impacted me just how phenomenal the people were. Fortunate to get to know, Mr. Lurie, Howie, the whole crew. They had a really long, thorough process. It was really impressive. And so obviously those relationships and those conversations extended beyond just that, that day or two. And so, obviously those things, I think have led us hopefully to something where we've had an opportunity to come here and team up with these guys.
How's your system different? How's your system different from what Eagles have done here the past 3 years?
Yeah, I think everyone's got their different flavor from a systematic approach. I think our real focus here as we've gone through this process is, we got a lot of good going on, and we can't lose the good and the reps that, Jalen and AJ have developed and Dallas has developed, this offensive line have developed, and how can we build off of those things and really connect the whole thing. And so that's been a really fun process. There'll be tweaks, there'll be changes. Everything's constantly evolving. That's part of this whole offseason program. I mean, we just got to our first week of actually being on the field with these guys. Once you get on the field, things just start evolving. And so that's really where we're at. We're at a really beginning level of this thing. We're really, really excited to go through this process with phase 3, get a little bit more field work. And then really when you get to training camps, when you can really hammer in the run game and the play action game and how all that stuff connects.
You talked about having outside ideas, and you talked about blending philosophies, finding someone who has other answers. What's that blending like with just kind of what's it like when you guys work together? What do you work, or just kind of an insight to what that experience is?
I think it's a really fun process. Fortunately, like most of us who go in this profession, you have different times in your career where, whether it's a new coach coming in or you're going to a new place, there's people just have different exposures. And so the more conversations you can have, the more discussion points. Hey, we had an issue with this. Hey, we had a potential answer, vice versa. And you have that continuous conversation. It's been really, really fun. I love the opportunities that we can sit down, we can just talk about things. And I learn from Nick. Hopefully I can bring some things that, people can learn hopefully from just maybe an experience that I've had that's different than theirs. I think that's part of this whole process is we got a really, really good coaching staff here. There's a good reason. I was fortunate to bring Doug and Kyle, but a lot of guys stayed here because we got a really, really good staff.
How does that compare to the previous stops? Like, is it more collaborative? Would you feel like it's a different process to what you've done in the past?
Each stop is, really the big emphasis is on collaboration. And so whether it's, when I was fortunate to hop as an OC role, we kind of kept the system in place and kind of made our little adjustments when Jason was our head coach. Mike came in Dallas. We were fortunate to kind of merge those two worlds together. It was a really fun process. And then going to LA last year, we had a similar thing where, try and keep some of the things that are in place, build off of that, and kind of build ultimately what our 2023 last year. And obviously this year our focus is really ultimately what do we want 2024 to look like, whether it comes from 23 or beyond, wherever it comes from, it comes from.
You've been three quarterbacks in your career so far. What are your first impressions of Jalen and how it's unique to guys like Dak and Justin?
Yeah, I really enjoyed Jalen's process. So far, I think really it's focused on how he processes the game and just kind of the classroom aspect of it, and we're beginning the field process of really getting out on the field and being able to do this thing. But I've really enjoyed our conversations. I think he's a really smart player. He has a great feel for this game. The more conversation we have, the more we get to make these adjustments and build off of this thing. But Jalen's one of the premier quarterbacks in this league for a reason, and you see it, on film previously, but obviously getting on the field now, you're certainly seeing it.
How different will
Doug and Kyle, it seems like an apparent focus on quarterbacks and your choice there, if that's true. I mean, what do you guys feel needs to be accomplished there? What do you bring differently in terms of quarterbacks and your approach? What needs to happen?
I think anytime the quarterback room, voices are with the quarterback, and so I'm fortunate I've been around Doug for a number of years, really since he joined our staff in Dallas in 2018, but in 2020 he became the quarterback coach, and so we've kind of done this thing together for a number of years now, and we kind of complement each other and certainly personalities and the way we coach, and so we can kind of play off each other, feed off of each other really, really well. He does a phenomenal job with the details and the fundamentals, just of playing the quarterback position, and he does a great job with that. I think the more you're around him, you see him out on the field, the drill work and all the things that he does to tie the pass game together for the quarterback is huge. And it allows me to kind of stay in the scheme aspect of this thing, to be a little bit more on the philosophical side while still being able to overlap. And I think that's a critical aspect of this thing.
With Kellen, with Jalen, what's
How different will it be? Sorry, how different will it be having a quarterback like Jalen who is such a threat in the run game as opposed to like the other quarterbacks that you've had in the past?
Certainly what Jalen's done in the run game is there's a handful of guys who can do this in this league, and so it's certainly a really advantageous thing that we can continue to utilize, and certainly we will. And so it's a process that I've enjoyed, just better learning about how we've been able to use him, and then exploring some other ways as we continue to grow this thing, how we can continue to build off of that. And so it's something that Jalen's done a phenomenal job with, and we'll obviously continue to embrace.
What's been the process as far as getting to know Jalen? Maybe not as much the football stuff, but just kind of getting to know him as a person and building that connection.
Yeah, I think that's the fun process, the whole thing. It's a very ongoing process, just like any player on our offense. Anyone who comes into a new environment, you're trying to connect with the guys as much as you can. And so I've really enjoyed that process, even if it's a 30-second, 1-minute conversation heading out to the field, all the different things. What you quickly realize is, from Mr. Lurie to Howie to Nick, this place has been built on some phenomenal people. And you quickly feel it just being around this building. It's a really special place, and so I've really enjoyed it.
You interviewed to be, I guess, the head coach here in 2021. What did you learn about this organization through that process, and did you kind of rely on some of that information when it came time to accept this job?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it was just a really awesome opportunity to meet the people and connect with them. Like I was saying earlier, with Howie, Mr. Lurie, everyone, a lot of this building was a part of that process, and so those relationships continue to grow. Even beyond that couple days that process went on, and so it's been really good. You quickly realize how special the people are here. It's a really good organization. There's guys here who've been here for a number of years for a really good reason, and so you quickly felt that, and it's continued certainly up to today.
Jalen and the players learning a new terminology.
Terminology. I mean, plays are plays, words are words. I think it's a combination of things that we can build off of. Hey, if everyone understands a play and it makes sense, let's keep things in place. That's not that complicated. We're continuing to evolve the system to make sure that the language ties together, that the communication can be clean, and whether that word comes from Philadelphia, Los Angeles, or somewhere in between, we're building that as we go.
So does it come from Philadelphia, Los Angeles, or somewhere in between?
All three.
As a player and as a coach, you've played with and coached.
Roles and a lot of variety, and so that excites us as far as just the way we can present things for the defense, challenge people pre-snap with all the different alignments and personnel groups that we can play with. And so that'll be a continuing building process. I think the biggest thing is having clear identity of who we want to be, and ultimately week in and week out understanding their role, certainly through a game. There's going to be certain games where guys are going to get more attention than others. Understand that you're a big part of it. You may have the big time assist on a play, that gives us an opportunity for someone else to score a touchdown, and maybe the next week now it goes vice versa and someone else has to help the other guy out. And so I think there's that continuous trust as we build this thing.
When it comes to motion and offense, that's been one of the things that's a little bit different. The Eagles, a lot of ways to impart information. The Eagles haven't used it a lot. You're typically in the top 10. Is that something based on the players, or is that your sort of philosophy to have?
Yeah, certainly the shift in motion aspect of it. It probably goes back, to how I grew up around the game with my dad being a high school coach and being in college at Boise State. We kind of used it a lot. And so it's always kind of stuck with me. I think there's obviously advantages to it. There's some things that you're trying to gather information for the defense, and there's other times you're simply stressing the defense. And so, I think there's those two elements, and ultimately you're trying to build packages and create things so that the run and the action game and the drop back game, and so there's alignment and there's similarities with the presentations that allows us to stress the defense with those different looks.
On game day, from a play calling perspective, what is the most important thing to you?
Clean operation. As far as for me, just keeping a clean operation for the quarterback. Hopefully we prepared the right way. We understand that adjustments have to be made during games. There's always those elements, but you got to be a clean, steady operation for the quarterback. He deals with a lot during games. understand that aspect of it, and hopefully I can provide that.
Who have you admired the most as a play caller?
As a play caller, you learn from each and every experience. I think that's the big thing. I don't think I'm stuck in this is the one way of doing things. My dad was a high school coach. I was fortunate to play in college for Chris Peterson, who was a really phenomenal coach at Boise State. Through my NFL journey, I've been with a bunch of head coaches, whether I was a player or a coach. And so you take different examples from each and every one of those guys. And so you're continuing to evolve as a coach, just like our systems continue to evolve. And I think that's the biggest thing is we just embrace that, we're constantly trying to find what's the next element, what's the new thing, what's something that can give us an advantage. And I think that's the most important aspect of this thing.
What about vision for Saquon?
For Saquon, Saquon's a premier running back first and foremost. And so we're really excited about his ability to run the football. Obviously, behind this offensive line has done a tremendous job, and they have such cohesion and done a great job up front. He's going to be a great running back. But obviously, we know the aspects that make him great is his ability to be a pass protector, to be a receiver out of the backfield. He does a phenomenal job with those things. And I think, obviously, we got to try and utilize him as much as we can while understanding it's a long season for all running backs. And so, I think we got some great guys behind him, and Kenny and Will and all the rest of the guys over there that we're excited about. And so, we're fortunate to have Saquon.
When it came to this transition from the Cowboys to the Chargers, what did you learn about yourself as a coach from that transition that you feel like you can use from the Chargers to here?
Yeah, really, I was fortunate in Dallas to go from a player to a coach, and so I was kind of in the same place for 8 years. And so going somewhere really ultimately very new to you, very little connection initially, you learn to grow. You learn how to make the adjustments necessary as you kind of build a system and all that sort of stuff. And so I think you definitely grow a lot from that experience, and hopefully it helps, moving forward to this place.
I think Kelsey was responsible for blitz protection and pickups for many years here. He's no longer here, obviously. Do you anticipate Cam Durgans will assume that role?
Yeah, I think it's a similar process as far as Cam, but obviously you're continuing to evolve that system. I think the biggest thing is that'll take the whole offseason and even through the season is continuing to utilize the offensive line has a great perspective, the quarterback has a great perspective, and ultimately those guys have to be aligned and on the same page. And so really excited about just getting on the field with these guys and really building that system and understand what tools we have in the toolbox, continue to have those conversations where we can have the answers necessary to handle the different challenges that defenses present.
What are the most challenging? What are the keys to supplying quarterbacks answers against pressure?
Yeah, I think it's just having a clean toolbox. There's a lot of different things we can do, but just making sure it's clean, effective, and as you build it, you got to continue to evolve. And so that, 1 week, maybe your answer is a certain play, and then maybe the next week you got to make the adjustment off of that. And so that's, I think, the continuous evolution through the season. There's going to be different challenges each and every week. We're going to walk into a room and deal with the protection, and we're going to look at it, and there's going to be a couple challenges each and every week. That's what these defenses do. They're really good. They scheme you up. They give you a lot of challenges, and so you're continuing to find, okay, what's the next tool that we can use? What's the next tool that we can use while still keeping it clean for the quarterback so that he knows exactly what he needs and he can handle it accordingly.
What have you found to be the most challenging elements of blending offensive philosophies?
It's a great question. I think it's really just comes down to just making sure the language is consistent. I think that's the biggest process that, when maybe you make an adjustment with the language, as funny as this may sound, making sure it doesn't fall into an issue down the line and something else, whether you make an adjustment to a pass play and maybe the words now, associated to a screen and vice versa. There's just some language stuff that you're continuing to make sure we just keep it really clean for these players so they can play fast, know exactly what we want to accomplish each and every play, and so they can just go for it.
So follow up, it sounds like you're keeping some language, you're bringing in some of your former language, and then you're creating new language to have it all sort of fused together. It sounds complicated. Is it a complicated process?
No, plays are plays. Football's football. I think a lot of us have been exposed to this. I think the biggest thing is, you want to just make sure the language is connected. And so each and every year, even if I was in Dallas, every single year we went through this process. It was the same process. You go through it, and during the season, you just want to clean up the language, make sure it's clean. And so some of this language, some of it will fall into 2023 Philly, some of it will fall into Dallas or LA, and some of it will ultimately come from, hey, we just want to clean this whole thing up, and we're just going to create a new family of words association. And so that's the biggest thing for us, is just making it a really clean system, and that's what you do each and every year, no matter where you're at.
When you were hired, what did Nick say he wanted from you as the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, Nick and I, we just had some great conversation. Obviously, we've been in contact. We've known each other for a number of years just from afar, and so tons of respect for Nick. Really enjoyed, when we competed from opposite sidelines, but then obviously get to know him off the field. We went through the interview process. It was phenomenal. Really good group. I think the biggest thing was, I felt like, hey, we got some really good stuff going on here, and we can't lose the good. And so Nick and I are really excited just to team up on this thing, team up as a whole offensive staff, and really just build this offense exactly how we want to in 2024.
What have you learned about him that maybe you didn't know before you came here?
I think he's excellent with the details and holding guys accountable to the details and the fundamentals. And that's what I've been really excited about this first few weeks of just getting on the field, is how much attention we focus on the fundamentals and details. I think he does a phenomenal job with it. He does a phenomenal job holding guys accountable in the team meetings with it. And it's going to be a really exciting process.
Where do you stand on how much you give a quarterback autonomy to change plays at the line?
Yeah, ultimately they have a front view seat at this thing, and so we want to give the QB tools and the ability to make the adjustments necessary at the line of scrimmage, while also trying to keep it as clean and concise so he can play fast. And so ultimately we want them to have the ability to make the adjustments necessary, but we can't dilute it to the point that he's got $500 million things that he can potentially do at the line of scrimmage, and now we're not all on the same page. And so a lot of times the QB knows what it is, but it's also about making sure all 11 are tied to what those adjustments are. And so Jalen's been phenomenal. I'm excited about building that process with him.
When you look at their defense,
your sixth year as an offensive coordinator, how has your youth and your playing experience helped you or factored into your coaching?
Yeah, obviously, I'm 35 now. When I first got into it, it was funny because I was really slid into the OC role, and I was with a lot of guys that I'd actually played with. And so as you're going, obviously that aspect of it changes, and you become a little bit of an older coach, so to speak. But obviously, anyone who's been able to be fortunate enough to play in the league, play in college football or wherever it may be, you can always lean on those experiences and those exposures. And so it's been a fun process. I've really enjoyed, just getting to know these guys, getting to know the staff, spending time together and building this thing.
when you look at
come up as a kind of playful way around the building.
Yeah. Obviously, it's unique, within the division, and so I was fortunate to be there for 8 years. Obviously, I had a lot of great experiences. This thing's been awesome here. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun.
last one, Martin. When you look at the offense from the last 6-7 games, and Nick has kind of admitted like it kind of grew stale and everything. What did you see, and like how did you kind of figure you can kind of add your touch to that?
Yeah. Obviously it's hard for me to judge it totally being from afar because I don't know the day-to-day aspect of it. But obviously, every team's going to go through different challenges. Those things come up, whether it's wins, losses, offensive success, defensive success. There's I think really ultimately, we're really focused on 2024. You learn some lessons from 2023 just as far as, some different things that come up. But, you really just try and move forward. I wasn't around for that. And so, I'm probably a bad judge too. You guys were around it closer than me. So.
All right.
All right, thanks.
So that was Kellen Moore, new offensive coordinator. A little before that, you heard from new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. We're going to be reacting to it the rest of today. I'm sure the Best Show Ever has a lot planned to react to it, and we'll do it tomorrow as well. But, Amy, my initial reactions, I know winning a press conference isn't important necessarily in the NFL. It's what they do on the field. But both Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore, they sound like head coaches.
Listen, I could listen to Vic Fangio answer questions all day. That guy's a riot. I enjoyed you. Anytime you start with, I grew up watching, in the shadow of the link, and you finish with, I eat at the Palladium.
Yeah, you're loved.
That's it. He loves the Phillies. He's all in. Big Phillies fan, as we know. But, yeah, no, I thought it was great. And they answered the questions, I think, how we expected. They were forthright. They named names. They talked about some of the things about, all right, how is your offensive game plan going to mesh with Nick Sirianni, which is a question for Kellen Moore. What do you see in the linebackers? That was a question for Vic Fangio. I thought that they answered, as well as you could be expected. I thought they actually were very forthright.
Yeah, they were. And what I found interesting from Kellen Moore was they asked him about Jalen Hurts' running ability. And he said it's an advantageous thing for us that we can utilize, and we will, and how we build off of that. So I love that they're going to still utilize Jalen Hurts' legs. Talked about Saquon Barkley. He made a point to say he's a running back, and we are going to have him run the football and take advantage of the other things he does well, which is catch the ball out of the backfield. So these were things that we wanted to hear, and I think we heard them.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, hey, how is your offensive philosophy going to match up with Nick Sirianni's? Because Nick Sirianni used the words mesh, and he says we're going to team up on this. I think that those are things that people need to hear. You need to hear how it's going to work. You want to know that there's going to be some difference. Kellen Moore has distinct ideas what he wants to do with these players. It doesn't mean he's going to negate what his head coach is saying, but it means that he's got his ideas, and he's going to take – any good coach is always going to take what other people can offer and see how it works in the system that you've designed.
Yeah, and we talked about it when we first started the show this morning with regard to whether or not Nick Sirianni's offense should be a blend with Kellen Moore. And I thought when Kellen Moore was asked about that, he said, we have a lot of good going on. How do we build off of that? There will be tweaks and changes. We're constantly evolving. But I like that he's saying, look, we're not starting from scratch. We're going to build off of what they already did well.
He's walking in and he's having two top-tier wide receivers locked down. He has to be salivating at the idea of some of these offensive players. And so he now is like, all right, you did some good things. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to take some of those, and I'm going to see what I can put in there to see how it can mesh well together.
And before we end the show, I got to tell you about the Fanatic Deal of the Week. Palhana Tiki Boat Tours set sail with the Fanatic Deal of the Week. This week only, get the first 6 spots for your private tiki cruise from Palhana Tiki Boat Tours. Half off, just $225. You'll float on the Ocean City Bay on a private 26-foot cruise equipped with thatched roofs, club-quality speakers, and bar stool seating. Get this exclusive offer while supplies last at 975thefanatic.com/deals. Amy, this was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Looking forward to doing it again. You won't be here tomorrow, but I'll be here with Bob Cooney back at his regular time slot, just one day off. So we'll be reacting to this the rest of the day. Keep it here for the best show ever.